You've been taught to stay calm by ignoring your feelings, to stay positive by pretending everything's fine. But if that really worked, why do so many people who try it still wake up tired, drained, and lost in their own heads? Why do the smiles feel fake? Why does the peace never last? The truth is, calmness isn't found in silence alone. It's found in awareness and real positivity. It's not about pretending bad things don't exist. It's about training the mind to see clearly, even in darkness. That's where Buddhism comes in. For thousands of years, Buddhist wisdom has shown people how to stay rooted when the world feels shaky. How to smile. Not because life is perfect, but because the mind is free. It teaches a different kind of strength, not loud, not forced, but the kind that's unshakable. Quiet power, soft resilience, real peace. And tonight, as you lie down and let these words guide you, you'll begin to feel it. The chaos inside will soften. The noise will quiet. Not because the problems disappear, but because you stop gripping them so tightly. And when you wake up, you'll feel it in your chest, your breath, your eyes, lighter, clearer, stronger. This isn't just another sleep track. This is the start of a shift you've been needing for a long time. A return to the part of you that already knows how to stay calm, that already knows how to be happy for no reason at all. Are you ready? Let's begin. And now that the truth has been set, now that you understand this isn't about escaping your mind, but about returning to it with peace, there's one place we have to begin, not with more thinking, not with another strategy, but with breath. The quiet act that's been with you since your first moment, often ignored, but always holding the key to stillness. This is where it starts, with letting go one gentle breath at a time. Some nights, the weight of the day feels glued to your chest. Not heavy in a way you can see, but in the tightness of your breath, the restlessness of your legs, the way your mind clings to every unfinished conversation, every missed deadline, every small moment where things didn't go as planned. This kind of tension doesn't just disappear by telling yourself to relax. It needs something softer, something deeper. And in Buddhism, that answer begins with awareness of breath, not just as a function of the body, but as a doorway to release. Letting go doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending the day didn't happen. It means loosening your grip on it. The mind holds tight without even realizing it. It replays what went wrong. It argues with what already happened. It resists reality like it has the power to rewrite it. And all of that resistance gets stored, not just in thoughts, but in the nervous system, in the breath, in the way your shoulders rise just a little too high before bed. That's why Buddhist breath practice isn't about controlling the breath. It's about witnessing it, feeling it, trusting it to guide you back into presence. Because the truth is, the body already knows how to calm itself. It's wired for it. But most people never stop long enough to listen. As you lie in bed, the practice begins with noticing how you're breathing, not fixing it, just noticing. Is it shallow? Is it rushed? Is your body holding it like a question it's afraid to answer? That awareness alone starts to melt the tension. The breath, once noticed, starts to slow naturally. It deepens on its own. And as it does, something shifts. Not just in your lungs, but in your entire emotional system. Buddhist monks refer to this as non-grasping. The breath flows in, it flows out, and there's no clinging to either. Inhale without forcing, exhale without holding, and that rhythm, practiced gently, begins to teach the mind a new truth, that letting go isn't losing something. It's returning to what's real, here, now. When this breath awareness is combined with non-attachment, something even deeper begins to happen. The mind starts to recognize that the events of the day no longer need to be carried. You don't need to rehearse that conversation. You don't need to calculate what should have gone differently. You don't need to fix the past, because with every exhale, the nervous system sends a message to the mind. It's okay to release now. You're safe. One of the most powerful Buddhist teachings on this comes from the Satipatthana Sutta, where mindfulness of breathing is presented not as a relaxation trick, but as a path to insight. Each breath becomes a teacher, noticing the in-breath, noticing the out-breath, and gradually noticing that what you thought was permanent, your stress, your thoughts, your identity, is actually always changing. This subtle awareness is called anicca, impermanence, and it's more than just a concept. It's a felt experience. That feeling you get when a tense breath softens, when the worry that felt so urgent an hour ago now feels like a memory with no sharp edges. That's impermanence. And when you meet it through breath, you start to trust that whatever you're feeling now will not last forever. That knowing brings calm faster than any mantra. Another tool from Buddhist tradition is the gentle naming of resistance. As you breathe, you might notice the mind trying to pull you back into tension, back into the loop. A thought about what someone said, a worry about tomorrow, a replay of something unfinished. Instead of fighting it, name it softly. Thinking, worrying, remembering, and return to the breath. This simple act dissolves identification. The thought is not you. The breath brings you back. What's interesting is that science now confirms what Buddhism has known for centuries. Deep, conscious breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural brake pedal. It lowers cortisol. It slows the heart rate. It shifts the body out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. But what science can't fully capture is the spiritual dimension of that shift. The quiet joy, the clarity, the unspoken sense that something sacred is happening when you simply sit with your breath and let the world drop away. In Buddhist monasteries, breath awareness is not just for stress, it's for awakening. The breath is a gateway to the present moment, and the present moment is the only place liberation lives. That's why this practice is not about forcing the mind to stop thinking. It's about becoming so present with the breath that thoughts lose their grip. They float by like clouds, and you no longer chase them. For those struggling to fall asleep, this practice can feel like a revolution. Instead of lying in bed trying to force the mind to be quiet, shift the attention to the breath. Not the breath as a means to an end, but as the end itself. Let each inhale be a welcome. Let each exhale be a letting go. You don't need to do anything else. And in that simplicity, peace begins to unfold. There's also something deeply emotional about breathing with awareness at the end of a hard day. because often what we're really holding on to isn't just events. It's feelings, disappointment, shame, guilt, the sense that you didn't do enough, that something's unresolved. And in Buddhist thought, these feelings are not mistakes to be erased. They're invitations to return. Each one is a call to presence, to feel it without judgment, to let it arise, to let it go. And here's where one of the most beautiful teachings comes in: non-resistance. It's not the same as giving up. It's not apathy. It's the understanding that when we stop fighting what is, the mind softens, it opens, it breathes again. Non-resistance is like unclenching a fist that's been held tight all day. It's the deep sigh after hours of holding it all together. It's the moment when you give yourself permission to just be. This is why, in Buddhist breath practice, there's no goal. You're not breathing to achieve something. You're not trying to become calm. You're simply becoming aware. And that shift from effort to awareness is what transforms everything. Because the truth is, the calm was always there. It was just covered by noise. Think of the breath like water clearing away dust from a mirror. With each cycle, the reflection becomes clearer. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped adding to the mess. That's what letting go feels like. Not dramatic, not intense, just clean, clear, free. And here's something else most people don't realize. Breath awareness can be practiced in micro moments, not just in long meditations. Even now, lying in bed, just take one full breath in and one slow breath out. That's it. That's the practice. You've just returned, and you can do it again and again, until sleep comes not as a struggle, but as a natural continuation of the peace you've created. In Buddhist sleep rituals, monks often do a brief breath meditation before lying down, not to get somewhere, but to leave the day behind. To recognize that whatever happened today is done. It belongs to the past. The breath now is new, fresh, alive. And with that breath, the body surrenders its grip. The mind releases its hold, and rest becomes a friend again. So, if your chest feels tight, let it rise and fall slowly. If your mind feels full, let it float in breath. If the day feels unfinished, trust that nothing is ever truly finished. And that's okay, because right now, you're not here to solve. You're here to soften, to release the sharp edges, to return to the part of you that doesn't need anything to be different in order to feel peace. That part of you has always known how to breathe. Once the breath returns, once the weight of the day begins to lift, and your mind is no longer gripping everything it cannot change, something subtle begins to surface. A kind of softness, not created by relaxation alone, but by release. And in that release, there is a quiet joy, not loud, not chasing anything, not needing proof, just there, quietly glowing underneath everything. This is where we go next, into the kind of joy that doesn't chase. Most people have been trained to seek joy the same way they seek attention, success, or validation. It's taught early: feel better by getting something, a new toy, a reward, a compliment. And so the mind, wired by habit, starts believing that joy only comes from things outside of it. That happiness must be earned or purchased or found in the next experience. But this belief becomes a trap, because the moment the joy wears off, the chase begins again. The next treat, the next hit of excitement, the next distraction. And over time, this constant seeking creates restlessness, a mind always reaching, never at peace, always chasing a high that fades the second it arrives. Buddhism speaks of a different kind of joy. It's called sukha. Not pleasure, not thrill, sukha. A calm, enduring inner gladness that doesn't rely on circumstances. It's not about the peak moment, but about the depth underneath it. Sukha doesn't surge, it sustains. It doesn't ask for more, it's already whole. And unlike temporary pleasure, it doesn't crash after rising. To understand sukha, you have to first see clearly what it's not. It's not the sugar rush of winning. It's not the laugh that masks a tired soul. It's not the scroll through hundreds of posts looking for something to make you feel alive. Those things are part of life, yes, but they don't last. And what doesn't last cannot bring peace. Buddhism teaches that chasing pleasure is like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become, and the body, the nervous system, starts to burn out from constant stimulation. But sukha isn't triggered. It's uncovered, like a calm lake revealed after the surface stops being stirred. And one of the most powerful teachings in the Buddhist path is that sukha is already present. It's just hidden under the noise of craving, the noise of comparison, the noise of wanting something different from what is. Craving is the first flame that burns away inner peace. It's the subtle voice that says, "This isn't enough." It might disguise itself as ambition, or self-improvement, or harmless preference. But at its root, it whispers, "Not yet, not here, not this." And so long as that voice is in charge, sukha cannot be felt. Because sukha lives in the opposite space, the space that says, "This is enough. This is already whole. I don't need more to feel joy." This shift from pleasure to sukha isn't about avoiding life. It's about experiencing it more fully. When the craving fades, the details come alive. The sound of wind, the warmth of a blanket, the weight of your body sinking into rest. Things that used to feel ordinary now feel sacred. Because you're no longer demanding something else. You're present, and presence opens the door to joy. In Buddhist practice, cultivating sukha begins with mindfulness. Noticing what pulls the mind toward craving. Noticing when the heart is leaning forward into next. Even small moments, the sudden urge to check the phone, the quick impulse to distract from discomfort. Every one of these moments is a chance to return, a moment to pause and ask, is this chasing joy or covering up something I don't want to feel? This question is powerful because it interrupts the cycle. It creates space between impulse and action. And in that space, the seed of sukha can grow. Because sukha doesn't bloom under pressure. It needs space, silence, simplicity. It arrives when you stop pushing. Monks in the forest tradition often speak of this joy arising after deep meditation. But not because they've achieved something. It comes when everything unneeded has dropped away. There's nothing to fix, nothing to prove, just the breath, the moment, the stillness. And from that stillness, joy radiates. not in fireworks, but like a sunrise you can feel but don't have to watch. Modern life makes this kind of joy feel distant. So much is built on stimulation, noise, alerts, the next thing. But Buddhism teaches that the world isn't the problem, the chasing is. Because even in a quiet room, the mind will run if it's been trained to do so. That's why sukha begins in training, not the world, but the heart. Training it to be okay here, with this, without waiting for something better. This isn't passivity, it's mastery. Because when you can find joy in stillness, in simplicity, in the silence between thoughts, you become free. You're no longer controlled by what happens. You're no longer a puppet pulled by excitement. You've rooted yourself in something deeper, and that's the essence of sukha. There's a practice in Buddhism called mudita, which is the joy that arises in seeing others happy. It's closely tied to sukha because it's joy that doesn't need to be about you. You feel glad just because gladness exists. No jealousy, no comparison, just delight in well-being. And this opens a deeper truth, that sukha is often blocked not by lack of pleasure, but by the presence of envy, resentment, or the belief that you're missing out. So part of cultivating sukha is clearing those inner barriers, noticing when the heart contracts, when it resents someone else's joy, when it believes it should be elsewhere, and in those moments, softening, returning to the breath, returning to now, and letting go of the illusion that happiness lives outside of you. Buddhist psychology also introduces the idea of the 5 hindrances, mental patterns that cloud clarity and prevent sukha. Sensory craving is one of them. Restlessness, ill will, sloth, and doubt are the others. But craving is often the loudest, and it's sneaky. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It says, just one more thing, just a little more. And it convinces you that joy lives one step away from now. But sukha doesn't respond to that voice. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase. It waits, quietly, until the chasing stops. And when it does, sukha steps forward, not as an achievement, but as a reminder that peace is not found, it's remembered. Sleep is one of the best times to connect with sukha, because at night the external world fades, the distractions pause, and you're left with your own mind. If that mind is always trained to seek stimulation, the stillness will feel like emptiness. But if the mind has learned to rest in awareness, the stillness becomes a refuge, a sanctuary, and sukha can fill that space like warm light. That's why Buddhist monks treat sleep as part of the path, not a break from practice, but a continuation of it, a time to rest the body while training the mind to stay rooted in joy that doesn't fade when the lights turn off. A joy that isn't shaken by dreams or fears or past regrets. Just the calm presence of awareness resting in itself. And here's the most empowering part. Anyone can access this. You don't need to be advanced in meditation. You don't need a perfect environment. You just need the willingness to stop chasing, to stop believing the lie that something else will finally make you happy, and to start noticing the joy that's already here beneath all the striving. Each night before sleep is a chance to do this, to ask yourself gently, what am I chasing? And What if this moment, right now, is enough? That simple reflection can shift your whole nervous system. It can teach the mind that contentment isn't boring, it's healing. And over time, the heart begins to recognize that sukha isn't a retreat from life. It's the fullest experience of it. And when you wake up and the mind tries to run again toward tasks, toward goals, toward what's missing, you'll have a deeper place to return to. The quiet knowing that joy doesn't need to be hunted. It needs to be uncovered. And you already know the way. And once the heart begins to remember the kind of joy that doesn't chase, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes or applause, a new kind of calm begins to rise. But to keep that calm steady, especially when life shifts or emotions surge, something deeper is needed. Not just inner joy, but balance, a grounded center that stays firm through the highs and the lows. This is where we turn to one of the most powerful teachings in all of Buddhism. Not about avoiding emotion and not about pretending to be okay. It's about equanimity, the middle path of mood. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't need to smile all the time. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to convince others it's fine. It's the kind of strength that knows how to stay with what's happening without clinging to the good or running from the bad. That's equanimity. And it's not just some spiritual ideal. It's the very foundation of emotional stability. The thing that holds you together when everything else tries to pull you apart. Most people have been taught to treat emotions like a roller coaster. When things go well, rise up, feel good, celebrate. When things go wrong, fall hard, collapse, worry, try to escape. But this constant up and down doesn't bring happiness. It brings exhaustion. Over time, the body starts to wear out from the emotional whiplash. The nervous system stops trusting peace because it's never consistent. And slowly, even the good moments become laced with anxiety because the mind knows they won't last. Buddhism offers a radical alternative, not a numbness to life, not a denial of feelings, but a middle path. The ability to feel deeply without being swept away. The ability to stay present with both pleasure and pain without losing yourself in either. That's what equanimity trains. It doesn't erase emotion. It holds it with spaciousness. And in that spaciousness, something incredible happens. You stop needing every situation to go your way in order to feel peace. One of the biggest myths about positivity is that it means being upbeat all the time. That you have to see the silver lining, say something nice, find the lesson, or look on the bright side. But that kind of forced positivity can become toxic. It creates pressure to suppress what you feel. It teaches you to push down sadness, ignore anger, or feel guilty for being upset. And when you do that long enough, the emotions don't disappear. They fester. They start leaking out in other ways. Tension in the body, restless sleep, sudden anxiety for no reason. That's not peace. That's emotional avoidance. Equanimity is different. It says you can be present with discomfort without needing to fix it. You can let joy arise without gripping it. You can allow grief to visit without letting it destroy your inner home. It's a posture of openness, not reaction, a willingness to be with what is, without adding extra layers of judgment or demand. To cultivate this kind of stability, the first step is mindfulness. Noticing what your mood is doing in real time. When things go your way, does the mind start to grasp? Does it whisper, "I hope this lasts"? That grasping is subtle fear, and it's the beginning of imbalance. On the flip side, when something hard happens, does the mind tighten? Does it say, "This shouldn't be happening"? That resistance is where suffering grows. Equanimity steps into both situations and says, "This too, this belongs." Not because it's pleasant, not because you enjoy it, but because it's part of life. And the more you push against reality, the more pain you create. So instead, return to the breath, feel what's here, and let go of the mental commentary trying to control the story. There's a phrase in Buddhism, the 8 worldly winds. They're pairs of opposites, gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute. The Buddha taught that these winds blow through every life, no matter how wise or strong you are. And if your peace depends on being blown in the direction you like, you'll never be steady. But if you can stay rooted while the winds blow, now that is real freedom. Think of a tree. When the wind picks up, the branches sway, but the roots hold firm. That's equanimity. You don't have to stop feeling, but your inner roots keep you from being uprooted. You respond with care, but not panic. You feel emotions fully, but you're not owned by them. Another part of this practice is understanding impermanence. Every emotion has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But when you fight a feeling, it sticks around longer. When you try to make a good feeling stay forever, it slips through your fingers. Equanimity reminds you, all of it is passing. Even the worst wave will crest and fall. Even the most beautiful moment will change form. That's not tragic. That's life. And once you trust that rhythm, you no longer have to live in fear of what's next. This doesn't mean you don't care. Equanimity is not detachment in the cold sense. It's not indifference. It's fierce care without being consumed. You show up fully. You love deeply. But you know that clinging doesn't protect. It suffocates. And when you stop clinging, your love becomes freer. Your presence becomes deeper. Because you're not trying to bend life to your will. You're meeting it as it is. In meditation, equanimity is cultivated by sitting with whatever arises. Thoughts, sensations, emotions. You don't try to change them, you notice them. You say, "Ah, there's restlessness," or "there's sadness." And you watch it come and go. This non-reactive observation trains the nervous system to stop panicking when things change. Over time, it builds a calm that's not dependent on conditions. And that calm carries into daily life. Relationships become more peaceful because you don't need others to behave a certain way in order to be okay. Work becomes less stressful because success doesn't define your worth. Even failure loses its sting because you're not using it as proof of inadequacy. You've stepped out of the approval-rejection loop. You're no longer measuring your value by your mood. You're rooted in something deeper. And this rootedness isn't passive. It creates strength. Because when you're no longer afraid of feeling something hard, you become fearless in a new way. Not in the bravado sense, but in the quiet way that says, "I can handle this. I don't need to run." And when others around you lose their center, you stay grounded. Your calm becomes a lighthouse, not just for yourself, but for others who are still caught in the storm. One of the most beautiful effects of equanimity is clarity. When the mind is no longer clouded by emotional extremes, it sees more clearly. Decisions become wiser. Communication becomes kinder. Boundaries become cleaner. You're not reacting, you're responding. You're no longer driven by the fear of missing out, the fear of not being good enough, or the fear of feeling pain. You've made peace with all of it, and in that peace, your joy becomes deeper, not ecstatic, but stable, not flashy, but real. That's why Buddhist teachings often compare equanimity to a mountain, strong, unmoved by the weather, and yet fully alive. The mountain feels the rain, the sun, the snow, but it doesn't collapse, it holds, and you can hold too. To begin, start where you are. Notice your mood as you lie in bed. Is the mind restless, trying to hold on to the calm, wishing for a better feeling? Just observe. Don't try to change it. Label it gently and return to your breath. Feel the support of the bed. Let the body sink and remind yourself, this too, this is part of the path. And when you wake up tomorrow, life might offer you something pleasant or something difficult. But with equanimity, you no longer need to fear either one, because you're learning to hold it all with grace. And in that grace, there is power. The power to stay steady, the power to stay true, the power to live without the fear of losing your peace. That is the real gift of the middle path. It doesn't promise constant joy, but it offers something even better, a calm that no mood can break, a stillness that no chaos can shake, and a clarity that carries you through life, one breath at a time. And once the emotional waves have been steadied by equanimity, once the mind no longer rises and falls with every shift in mood, there's something else that begins to stir, something soft, something ancient. Beneath the need to control, beneath the effort to balance, there's a quieter longing, a longing to feel safe, to feel cared for, not just by others, but by the self. This is where kindness enters, not as a weakness, but as medicine. And tonight, it becomes the most important tool of all. Because what you feel in the moments before sleep can shape how your body heals, how your mind repairs, and how your dreams unfold. That's where metta comes in. Kindness isn't just a personality trait. In Buddhism, it's a state of consciousness that can be trained, directed, cultivated like a fire that warms everything around it. And metta, or loving-kindness meditation, is one of the oldest and most powerful practices for doing just that. Not only does it soothe the emotional body, it speaks directly to the nervous system. It tells the brain, you're not in danger. You're safe to rest. You're safe to let go. The nervous system doesn't understand words as much as it understands signals. Tension, rapid thoughts, shallow breath. All these send the message that something's wrong. But when the heart begins to soften, when the breath slows, when kindness floods the inner space, the body listens. And in that listening, it relaxes. Not because you told it to, but because it finally believes it's okay to stop guarding. Metta begins with a simple phrase, a wish. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. At first, it might feel awkward, too soft, maybe even silly. But that's only because most people haven't been taught how to speak to themselves with care. The voice in the head is usually critical, cold, transactional. It points out what's wrong, what could be better, what wasn't enough. But the heart knows another language, one that doesn't require perfection, one that simply says, "You deserve peace just because you're alive." In the practice of metta, these phrases are repeated slowly, with full attention, not as affirmations to force a belief, but as offerings, like planting seeds in the soil of your own mind. The more gently they're planted, the more deeply they take root. And each repetition sends a signal, not just to the mind, but to the body. Studies have shown that metta meditation reduces stress hormones, lowers inflammation, and even increases vagal tone, which is linked to resilience and emotional regulation. This isn't just spiritual, it's biological. Kindness, when practiced consistently, changes the wiring of the nervous system. Before sleep, this becomes especially powerful, because during the day, the body is in a constant dance between alertness and safety. The sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight mode, keeps you on guard, useful in emergencies, but exhausting when it's always switched on. If the mind goes to bed still scanning for danger, the body doesn't fully relax. And even if sleep comes, it's light, restless, filled with dreams that feel like puzzles rather than peace. But when metta is practiced before bed, it resets that baseline, it slows the heartbeat, it signals to the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest part of the body, to take over. And in that shift, true restoration begins, not just physically, but emotionally. Kindness becomes the bridge between consciousness and sleep. The practice also moves outward. Once you've gently offered kindness to yourself, you extend it to others. First, someone you love, then someone neutral, then someone you struggle with, and finally, to all beings everywhere. This expansion trains the heart to soften its boundaries, to move beyond isolation, to dissolve the quiet hardness that builds up from daily tension. It doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior. It doesn't mean forcing love. It means recognizing shared humanity, that every being, just like you, wants to be happy, wants to feel safe, and in recognizing that, your own pain softens, the sharp edges of resentment dull, and the nervous system feels less alone. This expansion also helps with unspoken fears. Many people carry quiet guilt or unresolved tension as they go to bed. Conversations that didn't go well, words left unsaid. Kindness doesn't erase those things, but it holds them. It brings warmth where there was cold. It brings compassion where there was judgment. And in doing so, it allows the body to release what it was too tense to let go of before. Even the face changes. Tension held in the jaw, the brow, the throat, these begin to melt. Because kindness isn't just a thought, it's a felt experience, one that travels through the body like breath. And when that kindness becomes a habit, sleep becomes more than a break. It becomes a kind of sanctuary, a healing chamber where every cell is allowed to rest in softness. For many, self-directed kindness is the hardest part, especially for those who've been taught to be tough, to push through, to perform. But in Buddhist practice, metta is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The Buddha himself taught it as a protection, a way to shield the heart, not with walls, but with warmth. Because the mind that rests in kindness is far less likely to spiral into anxiety, regret, or self-judgment. It's anchored, steady, and open. In modern psychology, metta is now being explored as a tool for trauma recovery, because trauma often teaches the body to shut down, to dissociate, to fear even rest. But when metta is introduced slowly, with care, it begins to reteach the body what safety feels like. Not safety through control, but safety through presence, through connection, through the feeling of being held by one's own awareness. The phrases can be customized. If "may I be happy" doesn't feel true, you can start with "may I feel okay" or "may I be kind to myself." The goal isn't to force a mood. It's to meet yourself where you are and offer something slightly softer than what the inner critic says. Even the smallest shift in tone makes a difference. And if there's resistance, that's okay too. The mind might say, "This is pointless," or "I don't deserve this." That's not a failure. That's just the voice of old conditioning. You don't have to argue with it. You don't have to believe it. You just return to the phrases, return to the breath, return to the warmth. And with repetition, something shifts. It might start as a flicker, a small moment of ease, a sigh that feels deeper than usual, a tiny moment where you feel yourself melt into the bed a little more. That's the nervous system responding. That's the body saying, "Thank you." Not in words, but in calm. What's beautiful about metta is that it doesn't require belief. You don't need to feel deeply spiritual. You don't need to have a perfect mindset. You just need the willingness to offer care, to yourself, to others, to the world. And that willingness becomes the seed of transformation. With time, the habit grows. You might find yourself becoming less reactive during the day, less judgmental, more patient. Not because you tried to be, but because you trained the nervous system to stay soft under pressure. And that softness becomes strength, a strength that doesn't collapse, a strength that doesn't shut down, but holds. As sleep comes, the kindness continues. The body, no longer guarded, releases its tension. The mind, no longer driven, rests in warmth. And the dreams that follow are different, not chaotic, not anxious, but filled with the tone you set just before sleep. That tone becomes your inner atmosphere, and over time, it shapes not just your nights, but your days. Because the nervous system remembers. It remembers how you speak to yourself. It remembers how you settle into rest. And when kindness becomes your baseline, your world begins to change. Not because the world changes, but because you do. So, as you close your eyes, may you feel safe. May you feel held. May the breath carry you into sleep like a gentle wave. And may the kindness you offer tonight echo into every part of your being, until peace is not just something you wish for, but something you become. And once the body begins to trust safety again, once kindness flows through the nervous system like a balm softening the edges of tension, the mind starts to settle too. But that stillness can be fragile, especially when the day's sharp moments come back at night. The awkward things said, the reactions that felt too fast, the regrets that linger like echoes. This is where the practice of pause becomes everything. Because while kindness soothes, delay protects. And tonight, we explore the Dharma of delay, the sacred space between impulse and action. There's a split second before every reaction, a moment so brief most people miss it. And in that gap lies the difference between peace and pain, between regret and wisdom. Buddhism teaches that this gap is not empty, it is sacred, it is powerful, and if learned, It becomes a doorway to freedom from patterns that once felt impossible to change. Reactivity is one of the deepest habits in the mind. It's not just about losing your temper or saying something harsh. Reactivity is the automatic loop. When something triggers a memory, a fear, a discomfort, and the body jumps without pausing. It replies too fast. It shuts down. It grabs the phone. It numbs out. And then, later, regret shows up. Not because the situation was wrong, but because the mind wasn't present enough to choose differently. This happens because the nervous system is wired to protect. When it senses threat, it acts quickly. That can be useful in danger, but most of the time, it's not tigers we're running from. It's emotions. And when the body can't tell the difference, it reacts before the heart has a chance to speak. This is where Buddhist practice changes everything, because it teaches the art of the pause, the breath before the word, the stillness before the action, the space where wisdom has time to rise. This isn't about freezing or suppressing emotion. It's about becoming aware, noticing the tightness before it erupts, feeling the discomfort without acting on it, seeing the thought before believing it. That's the Dharma of delay, not a delay out of fear, but a delay out of clarity. This pause can feel small, but it's not. It's a revolution. Because when you pause, you reclaim choice. The old habit doesn't win. The past script doesn't run the show. Something new becomes possible. And that moment, where you feel the heat rising but choose breath instead of reaction, that's where real change begins. One of the key teachings from the Buddha is the chain of dependent origination. It explains how suffering arises moment by moment through a series of links. Contact leads to feeling. Feeling leads to craving. Craving leads to clinging. Clinging leads to becoming, and on it goes. But the moment of feeling, that's where the pause can happen. That's where the chain can be interrupted. You feel something, and instead of running from it or acting out of it, you sit with it. That sitting dissolves the chain, and suffering loses its grip. This pause isn't about thinking harder. It's about sensing deeper. Where is the breath right now? What does the chest feel like? Is the body speeding up? Is the mind racing? These signals are clues, and in Buddhist meditation, becoming intimate with these clues is the practice. You learn to feel the early signals of reactivity, not to stop them by force, but to see them clearly. Because awareness itself is a kind of medicine. When the light is on, the patterns lose power. At night, when the body slows but the mind replays the day, the absence of pause becomes visible. You see where you rushed, where you snapped, where you avoided, and the mind tries to rework it, replay it, fix it. This is where overthinking thrives, in the ruins of reactions. But here's the secret. Regret doesn't bring healing. The past can't be rewritten, but the future can be prepared for. And every pause practiced now is a seed for different reactions tomorrow. Buddhist practice doesn't demand perfection. It offers compassion. So, when you reflect on moments you wish had gone differently, don't spiral into judgment. Use them as training. Rewind not to punish, but to understand. What was happening inside you? What belief got triggered? What emotion rose too quickly to hold? This reflection, done with care, trains the mind to spot those moments earlier next time, and each time you spot it sooner, the pause grows stronger. There's also a myth that reacting fast is a sign of strength, that speaking quickly, moving decisively, acting on impulse shows confidence. But Buddhism flips that story. True strength is in restraint, not in holding back out of fear, but in holding steady out of wisdom, in knowing that a word delayed can prevent a wound, that silence, when chosen, can speak volumes, that not every impulse deserves your energy. This kind of strength doesn't shout, it doesn't explain itself, it just waits, and in that waiting, it finds clarity. The training begins small. Notice when someone says something slightly annoying. Feel the heat rise. Don't act. Breathe instead. Let it pass. Maybe speak later. Maybe not at all. Notice when an urge to escape appears. Check your phone. Distract yourself. Criticize someone silently. Pause. Don't judge. Just feel the pull. Let it be there and breathe. Every one of these micro pauses rewires the brain. They teach the mind that it doesn't need to obey every impulse, that it can witness without reacting, that presence is more powerful than speed. Over time, the nervous system recalibrates. The default reaction becomes slower, softer, and in that space, deeper responses arise. Maybe a more thoughtful word, maybe a question instead of a defense, maybe just silence and a knowing smile, and these new responses change the world around you. Conflict lessens, misunderstandings drop, relationships deepen, because you're no longer adding fuel to every fire. At night, this pause practice becomes a powerful ritual. When thoughts rush in, when the mind replays moments, catch the pattern. Pause. Breathe. Say to yourself, that moment is gone. I can rest now. And return to the body. Feel the pillow, the covers, the breath. If regret rises, meet it with kindness. If anxiety stirs, meet it with space. Don't solve, just feel. This is where the nervous system learns to rest. Buddhist monks often speak of the pause as the place where insight lives, because it's only in stillness that truth can rise. And the more you pause, the more you see, not just what happened, but why. And this seeing isn't harsh. It's liberating, because it shows you that you're not stuck, that the loop can be broken, that the script can be rewritten one breath at a time. And what's most beautiful about this practice is that it doesn't require perfect silence or ideal conditions. You don't need to be in a temple. You don't need hours of free time. You just need presence. And presence is always available, even in the middle of the night, even in the middle of a thought, even in the middle of your next breath. So, as you lie here now, feel that space. Between the inhale and the exhale. That's your window. That's your power. And tomorrow, when something stirs you, when the world asks you to rush, remember this space. Return to it. Let it hold you long enough to choose something wiser. This is the Dharma of delay, a simple, sacred pause, and from it, everything can change. And once the habit of pause begins to take root, once you learn to interrupt the cycle and breathe between impulse and action, a deeper question begins to surface. What exactly is being clung to? Why does the mind hold so tightly to control, to outcome, to approval, to stories that hurt. The ability to pause opens the door to something even more transformative, learning to loosen the grip completely, not to give up, but to let go in a way that brings peace without disconnecting from life. This is where the practice of non-clinging begins, and it changes everything. There's a heaviness that builds when the mind attaches itself to everything it touches. Expectations that become prisons, thoughts that turn into identities, emotions that define who we think we are. People that are held like lifelines, plans clung to as if they're the only route to happiness, and all of it weighs down the heart, not because the things themselves are wrong, but because of how tightly we hold them. Buddhism doesn't say to stop caring. It doesn't teach detachment as a form of emotional numbness. What it teaches is non-clinging, a way to love, feel, act, and live fully without being bound by what can't be controlled. It's not avoidance, it's spaciousness. It's learning how to hold without squeezing, how to be present without needing to possess. And that shift creates an inner lightness that nothing external can match. Non-clinging begins with awareness. It starts when you notice the subtle ways you grip. The mind replaying a conversation because it didn't end the way you wanted. The heart waiting for a message to feel okay. The breath shortening because tomorrow isn't going exactly to plan. These are not flaws, they're habits. And the moment they're seen clearly, the grip begins to loosen. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from pain itself, but from clinging to the idea that it shouldn't be there, gripping to the wish for different circumstances. When the mind insists that something must stay or never change, it suffers the moment change arrives, which it always will. Because everything changes. That's not failure, that's reality. And the mind that understands this can begin to move with life instead of against it. This doesn't mean losing ambition or stepping back from relationships. It means shifting how you relate to them. Instead of saying, "I need this to go my way to be happy," non-clinging says, "I'll give my full heart, but I'm not tying my worth to the result." That shift alone creates peace, because when you stop clinging, you stop suffering every time life doesn't match the script. There's a beauty in living lightly, not fragile, not disconnected, just unburdened. Like walking with open hands instead of closed fists. Life becomes more vibrant, more present, because you're no longer carrying yesterday's weight or tomorrow's demand. You're just here, with what is. And what's often misunderstood is that non-clinging increases intimacy. When you're not gripping people out of fear, you love more honestly. You listen without planning your defense. You support without needing something back. You let people be who they are without needing to fix them. And strangely, that freedom deepens connection. Because people feel safer around presence than they do around pressure. The same applies to emotions. When you cling to a mood, good or bad, you get stuck. The joy fades and you chase it. The sadness lingers and you identify with it. But when you let emotions rise and fall without naming them as me or mine, they move through, they change form, they complete their cycle, and what remains is awareness, still, watching, unmoved. Non-clinging is also a tool for healing. So many wounds stay open because of the mental story wrapped around them. The grudge, the self-blame, the narrative that says, "This should never have happened." And while pain must be felt to be healed, clinging to it keeps it alive. When you release the story, not the experience, but the grip on it, something unlocks. Space opens, and that space allows grief to turn into wisdom, anger to soften into clarity, loss to become presence. This doesn't mean you stop having preferences or stop caring how things go. It means you stop making your peace depend on them. You can still plan, work hard, love deeply, but you learn to release the outcome, to let things unfold. And that trust, not blind faith, but trust in impermanence, becomes a form of quiet power. In meditation, non-clinging is practiced by watching the breath or thoughts without grabbing onto them. When a thought arises, you don't push it away, but you don't follow it either. You watch it arise, stay, fade. The same with sensations, the same with emotions. Over time, this trains the nervous system to stop reacting to every flicker in the mind, and that inner steadiness spills into daily life. It shows up in traffic when someone cuts you off, and instead of reacting, you let it go. It shows up when plans change, and instead of panicking, you adjust. It shows up in relationships when a friend disappoints you, and instead of spiraling, you stay open. That lightness doesn't mean indifference. It means you're not carrying every moment like a weight. You're flowing with life instead of trying to drag it into shape. There's also freedom in letting go of roles. The idea that you have to be seen a certain way, that you must always be productive, impressive, helpful. Clinging to identity is one of the heaviest forms of suffering. But when you realize that you're not your job, your title, your past mistakes, or future hopes, when you let go of the need to be anyone at all, what's left is simple presence. And presence is where peace lives. Non-clinging can also transform how you handle uncertainty. When the future is unknown, the mind often clings harder. It creates scenarios. It imagines outcomes. It prepares for what might not happen. But none of that brings control. It only creates stress. Non-clinging invites a different way. To be with the unknown as it is, to prepare where needed, but not obsess. To rest in not knowing without collapsing into fear. And that kind of rest is rare. But it's available. Right now, in this breath. In Buddhist stories, there's a common theme. The more tightly something is held, the more likely it is to cause pain, whether it's a desire, a belief, a person. And the release, though frightening, brings relief. Not because you lost something, but because you stopped squeezing it to death. What you hold lightly stays longer. What you grip often breaks. And the practice doesn't have to be complicated. Start with small things. Notice when the mind says, "I can't relax until this is fixed." Pause. Ask, is that true? Can you still care, still act, but without the tension? Then try it with expectations. This should have gone differently. Can you meet what happened without the added commentary? Each time you let go, you gain something. Not more things, but more space, more calm, more freedom. At night, as you prepare for sleep, this practice becomes even more powerful, because the mind often brings all its clinging with it, unfinished plans, unresolved emotions, unmet desires, and the body feels that weight. But you don't have to solve everything before sleep. you can release your grip. Say to yourself, "Not now, I can rest without answers," and return to the breath. Return to the softness of this moment. That single gesture is non-clinging in motion. That is freedom. And over time, it becomes more than a technique. It becomes a way of being. You move through the world a little lighter. You hold people, experiences, even pain, with more grace. Because you've stopped trying to make everything permanent. You've stopped demanding that life fit your script. And in that surrender, something beautiful rises. Joy. Not from what happens, but from how lightly you can walk through it all. That is the power of non-clinging, not cold detachment, but the peace of a heart that can hold without gripping, that can feel without drowning, that can live without being owned by anything it touches. This is what it means to stay light. This is what it means to flow. And once the grip is loosened, once you've stopped clinging to what you thought needed to stay in place, emotions start to move differently. They're not blocked, they're not clutched, they're not exaggerated or pushed away. They begin to move through like they were always meant to. And in that movement, something else becomes clear. It was never about getting rid of feelings. It was about learning how to see them for what they are. Not as facts, not as identities, but as weather. Temporary, shifting, and completely natural. This next practice teaches the mind how to see emotions not as who you are, but as passing experiences in a much bigger sky. There are days when it feels like sadness is not just a feeling, but your entire identity. When anxiety doesn't just pass through, it becomes the lens through which the world is seen. The thought that it's temporary gets lost, and instead it feels permanent, defining, consuming. That's the danger of identification. The moment the mind says, "I am angry," instead of "anger is present," it merges with the emotion. The emotion isn't just happening, it becomes personal. And from that place, it's hard to see clearly, hard to act wisely, hard to feel hope. Buddhism offers a radical shift in perception. It teaches that emotions are not the problem. Misunderstanding them is. When you believe that every mood defines your truth, suffering begins. But when you see emotions as weather, clouds, wind, rain, sunlight, mist, passing through the open sky of awareness, they lose their grip. They're still felt, still honored, but they no longer own you. And in that space, peace returns. Not because the emotion disappeared, but because you stopped mistaking it for who you are. This practice is called non-identification, and it begins with awareness. Noticing when the mind grabs onto a feeling and gives it a name. I'm depressed. I'm a mess. I can't handle this. These statements feel true, but they aren't. What's true is this. A wave of sadness is here. A surge of fear is rising. A tightness is moving through the chest. That's honest. That's direct. And it creates space between you and the emotion. In that space, freedom is born. The mind tends to narrate everything it feels. And those narratives get sticky, especially when they're built from the past. This always happens. I'll never be okay. Something's wrong with me. But these thoughts aren't truth. They're habits, stories that formed long ago. And when emotions rise, the mind pulls out the same script. Non-identification means recognizing the script, but not believing it. Seeing the emotion, but not becoming it. When you start to view emotions as weather, something shifts in the body. A storm of anger might pass through, but you don't tense around it. A fog of doubt might cloud your mind, but you don't panic. You just stay open, let it pass. Just like clouds never damage the sky, emotions can't damage awareness. The sky doesn't cling to sunlight or resist the storm. It holds both. That's what your awareness can learn to do. This doesn't mean disconnecting from emotions. It means feeling them fully without being consumed. If sadness arises, you let it rise. You notice where it lands in the body. You feel it fully, but you don't claim it. You don't say, "I am this." You say, "Sadness is here." And even as you feel it deeply, there's still part of you that's watching, steady, open, unmoved. That part is the sky. And the more you learn to rest there, the less afraid you are of any weather that comes. In meditation, this is practiced by labeling, noticing a sensation, a thought, or an emotion, and naming it softly. Thinking, feeling, worrying, grieving. The label isn't to judge, it's to witness. And in that witnessing, you shift from identification to observation. It's a subtle move, but it changes everything. Because now, you're not the storm. You're the sky that allows it. One of the most common obstacles in emotional healing is the belief that strong feelings mean something is wrong, that anger means failure, that grief means brokenness, that fear means weakness. But in Buddhist psychology, emotions are not problems, they're messages, weather passing through. Each one carrying something, energy, memory, unmet needs, truth. And when you let them pass without clinging or resisting, they complete their cycle. They leave behind insight instead of damage. There's a teaching in Buddhism called Vedana, feeling tone. It's the immediate sense of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that arises with every experience. And it's what leads to craving or aversion. When something feels unpleasant, the mind clings to relief. When something feels pleasant, the mind clings to more. But when you observe the feeling tone without grabbing it, without pushing it away, it passes. You feel the discomfort, you witness the urge to react, and you stay. And in that staying, the emotion transforms. This is why non-identification isn't suppression. It's the opposite. It's allowing the emotion without building an identity around it. It's recognizing that every emotion is impermanent. No feeling stays forever. And when the mind stops feeding it with stories, the emotion begins to dissolve. Like rain that falls, softens the ground, and disappears. At night, this practice becomes especially important. Because in the quiet, old emotions tend to rise. Regret, loneliness, fear. They drift in like mist, subtle but heavy. And the mind wants to make them mean something, wants to say, this feeling is proof of something terrible. But it's not. It's just weather. Let it come, let it pass. You don't need to figure it out. You don't need to fight it. Just watch. And if the emotion feels too strong, come back to the breath. Anchor in the body. Feel the blanket. Feel the weight of the moment. Let the storm pass through you, not become you. That choice, moment by moment, is the practice. And every time you make it, the mind grows stronger. The heart grows wiser. The nervous system learns how to stay calm, even in discomfort. This also changes how you treat others. When you stop identifying with your own emotions, you stop reacting to other people's. You see their anger, their sadness, their fear, not as attacks, but as their weather. You don't take it personally. You don't have to fix it. You just hold space. And in that space, real connection can grow. Non-identification is not emotional distance. It's emotional wisdom. It means you feel deeply, but don't collapse. You experience waves of grief, joy, frustration, tenderness, but you remain the ocean, deep, vast, aware. And the more you rest in that awareness, the less you fear any emotion that rises. This practice also protects your peace, because once you stop being defined by emotion, you stop chasing the good ones and fearing the bad. You don't live for the high, you don't collapse in the low. You stay steady, clear. You stop riding the waves and start witnessing the tide, and that steadiness becomes a gift, not just for you, but for everyone around you. You become the calm in the room, the grounding force in the storm, not because you're unaffected, but because you've stopped believing that every emotion needs to become a crisis. The sky has room for all of it. So do you. Let the joy come. Let the sadness pass. Let the anxiety drift. Let the warmth settle. All of it belongs. None of it defines you. You're not the weather. You're the sky. And once you've learned to see emotions as passing weather, once you stop fusing your identity with every thought or feeling that rises, the next layer begins to reveal itself. It's not just the emotion that causes exhaustion. It's the thinking about the emotion, the overthinking, the constant inner noise that tries to make sense of what doesn't need to be solved. And it's here, when the mind won't stop spinning stories, that one simple practice can offer powerful relief. A visualization so gentle, yet so effective, it's like handing your thoughts a seat and watching them calm down just by being seen. This is where we explore the empty chair. There's a reason overthinking doesn't feel like thinking. It feels like drowning. The thoughts don't arrive one by one. They stack, they swirl, they loop. One worry leads to another, then to a memory, then to a possibility, and suddenly you're in a storm made entirely of your own mind. And the strangest part is that none of it feels optional. It feels automatic, as if you're being thought rather than doing the thinking. Buddhism teaches that freedom from this cycle doesn't come from stopping thought, but from stepping back, from watching it without becoming it. And one of the simplest tools for doing that is visualization. Not just visualizing something peaceful, but visualizing your thoughts themselves, giving them form, giving them shape, and most importantly, giving them distance. The empty chair technique begins with one image, a single chair placed across from you in your mind's eye. Nothing on it, just open, just waiting. And into that chair, you begin to place your thoughts, not all at once, not as a flood, but one at a time. Each worry, each repetitive loop, each anxious prediction, one by one, you let them walk into the room and take a seat. You're not rejecting them, you're not indulging them, you're just noticing them and giving them somewhere to sit that isn't your chest or your shoulders or your head. This practice is not about detachment in the sense of becoming cold. It's about gently separating awareness from identification. The thought still exists, but you are not inside it anymore. You're across from it. You're watching. And when the thought sits in the chair, something shifts. It becomes visible. Its voice becomes clearer, and often it becomes smaller. Most overthinking is powered by fusion, the belief that the thought is you. That if you're thinking it, it must be true, important, urgent. But when the thought is placed in the chair, it becomes what it always was, just a visitor, not a command, not a prophecy, not a fact, just a guest. And the more you watch it, the more it reveals itself. Maybe it's fear pretending to be logic. Maybe it's an old belief resurfacing as worry. Maybe it's just noise with nowhere to go. You don't need to interrogate the thought. You don't need to fix it. You just watch. And if it gets up and leaves, let it go. If another one walks in, let it sit. You remain the witness, steady, kind, unmoving. This act of visual placement trains the mind to relate differently to its contents. No longer caught inside the narrative, you're now the host, not the participant. This practice also speaks directly to the nervous system. Because when overthinking begins, the body often tightens. Shoulders rise, breath shortens, muscles clench. But when you visualize placing the thought outside of yourself, the body responds. It loosens. The breath deepens. Because the body believes the danger is being addressed, even if just symbolically. And in many ways, it is. You're honoring the mind's activity without obeying its every signal. One of the most helpful ways to deepen this practice is to give the thought a shape, a color, a posture. Let it become visible. What does your fear look like? How does your self-doubt sit in the chair? Is it slumped, rigid, pacing? This isn't just imagination, it's intimacy. You're learning the habits of your own mind by giving them space to be seen. Over time, the chair becomes a ritual, a place in your inner world where thoughts are allowed to come and go without hijacking your peace. And when a particularly loud or painful thought arises, you don't fight it. You welcome it to the chair. You again? Okay, sit. I'll watch. That's all. This non-reactivity disarms the thought. It no longer has power. It's just observed. What's profound about this is that the practice doesn't silence the mind. It changes your relationship with it. You stop trying to wrestle the thoughts to the ground. You stop believing they need to be solved. And in doing so, they begin to slow, because what fuels them most is resistance. The more you try to force them away, the louder they return. But observation calms them, because they've been acknowledged. This visualization also teaches emotional maturity. When you can sit across from your own thoughts without merging, you start to gain perspective. You realize that most anxious thoughts aren't fresh. They're echoes. Old fears wearing new clothes, old patterns replaying familiar lines. And from this distance, you stop reacting from habit. You respond from clarity. At night, this practice becomes especially helpful. Because overthinking doesn't just delay sleep, it hijacks the space meant for recovery. The mind starts listing, reviewing, regretting, forecasting, and without a technique to anchor you, the hours pass in tension. But when you return to the chair, something softens. You give the thought its seat, and you return to your breath. You give the next one its seat, and you return again. The body recognizes that nothing urgent is required, and sleep becomes possible again. There's also beauty in watching how some thoughts try to resist the chair. They don't want to be observed. They want to blend with your voice. But when you notice that trick, you smile gently and say, "No, I see you. You sit there." And in that moment, you're no longer the thought. You're the one seeing it. That seeing is liberation. This practice also helps with compassion, because the more you witness your thoughts without judgment, the more you extend that same compassion to others. You realize that everyone is walking around with chairs full of visitors, some loud, some afraid, some deeply tired. And instead of reacting to people's behavior, you begin to see the thoughts behind it, the weight they're carrying, the loops they're caught in, and your heart softens. In Buddhist teachings, this visualization connects to the deeper principle of mindfulness with detachment. You can see without owning. You can care without clinging. You can feel without being swallowed. And that balance creates space for rest, for reflection, for wisdom to arise. The empty chair is not just a trick. It's a training, a way of saying to the mind, "I hear you, but I'm not defined by you. I see you, but I don't need to obey." And the more often you practice, the stronger that muscle becomes. Eventually, even outside of meditation, the visualization shows up. In a conversation, in a moment of panic, in a flood of doubt. And you place the thought in the chair without even closing your eyes. You feel the space return. You feel the breath deepen, and your presence reclaims the moment. You don't need to empty the mind. Just give its contents a place to sit. You don't need to escape your thoughts. Just stop letting them follow you around. Let them have their chair, and let yourself rest. And after watching the thoughts take their seats, after separating from the loops that once pulled you in without mercy, there's finally room to feel what's been waiting underneath all along. The silence that doesn't feel empty. The breath that doesn't feel forced. The peace that doesn't need a reason. In that stillness, something begins to rise. Quiet, gentle, yet deeply powerful. It's not loud like excitement. It's not dazzling like pleasure. It's subtle, and it changes everything. This is where we turn to the Dharma of delight, the art of discovering sacred joy in the smallest, simplest things. Most people wait for joy like it's an event, like it needs a special occasion, a certain level of success, or someone else's permission. But Buddhism flips that idea. It teaches that joy isn't rare, it's not hidden, it's just overlooked, covered by speed, missed in the rush, forgotten behind the belief that only big things deserve celebration. But the truth is, most of life is made of small things. And if joy is only allowed to live in the spectacular, most of life gets labeled as ordinary, unworthy, background noise. That's where mindfulness opens the door, because mindfulness doesn't just create awareness, it amplifies beauty. It shows you what's been there all along. The Dharma of delight is a way of seeing, not changing what you do, but how you see what you're doing. It's walking to the kitchen and feeling the warmth of the floor under your feet. It's brushing your teeth and really tasting the mint. It's sipping water and noticing how it meets your thirst. These things sound small, but small is the doorway, not because they're dramatic, but because they're real. And the more the mind learns to rest in them, the more it learns that joy doesn't need to be earned, it just needs to be noticed. The Buddha taught that joy, piti, and happiness sukha, are natural outcomes of a mind at ease. They're not goals, they're signs. When the mind is not agitated, not reaching, not pushing, these qualities begin to appear, not in fireworks, but in the sparkle of the ordinary. That sparkle is what this practice trains you to see. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine or forcing a smile through discomfort. It means training the eyes of awareness to catch the moments the untrained mind misses. It means learning how to stop for 5 seconds and really feel the wind on your skin, the rhythm of your steps, the texture of the sunlight on your hands. These details aren't trivial. They're the fabric of your life. And each one, when met with mindfulness, becomes a seed of joy. Most people have joy habits that rely on achievement. Finish something, buy something, earn something, then maybe feel good. But these habits are built on delay. They teach the nervous system that joy is a reward, something that comes after. But the Dharma of delight removes the delay. It says, joy is available now, in this breath, in this second, in this very place you're already standing. This kind of joy has nothing to do with excitement. It's not dopamine-based. It's not about stimulation. It's about resonance, a subtle alignment between the heart and the moment, where the mind isn't leaning forward or falling backward. It's just here. And in that here-ness, something warm opens. That warmth is the delight, and it comes not from what's happening, but from how fully you're meeting it. When mindfulness rests on a small moment, the moment expands. A bite of food becomes a full experience. The sound of a bird becomes a song. The smile of a stranger becomes a soft echo that lingers in your chest. None of these things need to last. That's not the point. The point is that they're seen, felt, honored, and when they are, they leave behind a subtle trace of joy. In Buddhist teachings, this joy is not just pleasant, it's spiritual. It prepares the mind for insight. A joyful mind is more open, more flexible, more able to see clearly. Joy softens the inner world so that truth can be heard without resistance. That's why this practice isn't indulgent. It's essential. You're not chasing pleasure. You're uncovering joy that already lives in the world you walk through every day. But this takes training, because the mind is used to skipping. It wants to get to the next thing. And even when things are good, it wonders how long it will last. That habit of scanning, judging, predicting, that's what blocks delight. So the practice is to interrupt the scan, to gently say, this moment is enough, and stay with it, even for a breath, even for 3 seconds. That staying is where joy enters. There's also a teaching in Buddhism that says joy is contagious, not just socially, but inwardly. When you touch one joyful moment, the next is easier to see, and the next, until eventually the mind starts looking for what's good instead of what's missing, not out of denial, but out of balance. Because joy isn't about ignoring pain, it's about remembering that pain isn't all there is. You can practice this with anything: washing your hands, making your bed, opening a window. Each action becomes a ritual, a mini offering to awareness. And when you bring your full presence to it, something always reveals itself. A sound, a smell, a temperature, a sensation, something that was always there but hidden behind distraction. And when it's seen, the nervous system shifts, the shoulders drop, the breath settles, and the heart smiles without reason. The Dharma of delight is not limited to quiet moments either. It can show up in chaos, in laughter during hard times, in a deep breath in the middle of noise, in a moment of connection when everything else is falling apart. This joy is not fragile, it's resilient. It doesn't wait for things to be perfect. It rises through imperfection. At night, this practice becomes a gentle guide into rest. Instead of replaying the day's worries, the mind is invited to remember small joys. A warm shower, a kind word, a funny moment, a peaceful pause. You let the body feel them again, not to escape the hard parts, but to give equal space to the good. This balance teaches the brain to rest in gratitude instead of scanning for danger, and the sleep that follows is deeper, not because the world changed, but because your attention did. This also changes your relationship with time. When joy only lives in goals, time becomes a race, but when it lives in the present, time slows down. A walk takes longer, but feels better. A conversation stretches, but carries more meaning. Even silence becomes something to be with, not run from. That shift restores energy, because you're no longer leaking it through constant striving. There's no one way to do this. The practice is personal. For some, it's noticing the way light hits the wall. For others, it's the rhythm of footsteps, or the feeling of clothes on skin, or the comfort of a daily ritual. The content doesn't matter. The awareness does, because it's not the moment that creates the joy. It's your presence inside the moment. And this presence doesn't require special skills, just willingness. Willingness to pause, to soften, to feel. Even when it seems pointless, even when the moment seems too small to matter, because that's the secret. Nothing is too small. Everything is made of the small. And once you learn how to find joy in the overlooked, you realize that joy was never missing. It was just waiting to be seen. The Dharma of delight is a path that doesn't require you to add anything to your life. It only asks you to pay attention, to look again, to slow down enough that the world has time to show you what it's been offering all along. And in that seeing, you start to feel it. Not a rush, not a spike, but a warmth that builds. Quietly, surely. A joy that doesn't need to impress. A joy that lives right here. And once the eyes begin to notice the small joys, once the rhythm of everyday life starts to shimmer with sacredness, you begin to understand that joy doesn't always have to be found. Sometimes it can be given. Sometimes it can be offered. Not as a performance, not to be seen, but as a quiet expression of something deep inside. This is where the path of delight transforms into something even brighter, a joy that arises for no reason at all. A smile that's not waiting for permission. A radiance that doesn't need a cause. This is the smile without cause, inspired by the Bodhisattva spirit, and it has the power to uplift everything it touches. The Bodhisattva in Mahayana Buddhism is not a superhero. They're not someone perfect or untouchable. They are beings who choose to stay in this world, not out of duty or suffering, but out of deep love. Their goal is not just personal liberation, but the easing of suffering for others. They walk through life with an inner light that doesn't burn out when things get dark. And one of their most powerful qualities is joy. Joy not dependent on outcomes, not delayed by conditions, and not attached to how they are treated. joy that flows because it must, because it overflows. This kind of joy changes everything because it can't be stolen. When your happiness depends on what others say, what you achieve, or what goes according to plan, then your peace is always at risk. But when joy arises without cause, when it lives in the center of your being like a quiet sun, then even the storms don't shake it. This is not theory. This is a lived energy, and it begins with a shift in how you see your own presence in the world. In the Bodhisattva teachings, the mind is not a container for personal gain. It is a transmitter of energy. Your thoughts, your mood, your presence, all of it affects the space around you, whether you speak or not, whether anyone sees you or not. And when you begin to understand this, you realize that your peace is not private. It radiates. So the joy you cultivate, even if it's quiet, even if it's just a gentle smile in the dark, becomes an offering, not to prove anything, not to get anything, but because there is something inside you too generous to keep to yourself. The smile without cause is not a fake smile. It's not plastered on top of pain. It's a deep expression of freedom. Freedom from needing everything to be perfect in order to feel good. It doesn't ignore sadness. It includes it. It holds space for everything and yet still chooses to uplift. That's the Bodhisattva joy, and anyone can access it, not by force, but by presence, not by control, but by openness. One of the most surprising things about this kind of joy is how light it feels. It's not intense, it's not dramatic, it's soft. It's the kind of happiness that rests in the eyes, that hums beneath the words, that moves through silence like warmth. And the more you practice mindfulness, the more often it appears, unannounced, unearned, but unmistakable. This is not something the world teaches often. Most people are told their joy must have a reason, that it must be tied to success, pleasure, praise, or romance. But Buddhism says otherwise. The Bodhisattva's smile arises not from what they receive, but from what they give. And what they give is energy, not just action, but presence, uplifting the space just by being in it. To practice this doesn't require being visible. You don't need to speak. You don't need an audience. It can begin alone, in a room, in your bed, walking down a hallway, washing a dish. You just begin with breath. You feel your feet. You soften your face, and you allow a smile to arise, not to impress, but to align. You remember that this moment is alive, that awareness is here, that even now, even with no special reason, peace is possible. The mind might resist at first. It might ask, why smile now? What's the point? That's the conditioning talking, the belief that joy must be earned. But the more often you allow joy to appear without permission, the more the nervous system learns that it doesn't need a story to feel light, and slowly that smile begins to show up on its own, while walking, while folding laundry, while doing nothing at all. It becomes a habit, not of pretending, but of remembering. Because deep down, this smile is a remembrance that who you are underneath all the stress and noise is already whole, already kind, already full of light. The Bodhisattva doesn't wait to feel good in order to serve. They serve, and joy follows. And even in solitude, their presence ripples outward. This isn't spiritual fantasy, it's neurobiology too. When your heart softens, your breath deepens, your face opens, your entire system enters a state of restoration. And that restoration is not selfish, it's contagious. The people around you feel it, even if you never say a word. They sense the calm, the steadiness, the subtle invitation to feel safe. And in a world where most people are overwhelmed, that invitation is a rare and precious gift. The smile without cause becomes a refuge for you and for others. Practicing this doesn't mean denying your pain. It means not letting pain be the only voice in the room. It means creating space for joy to coexist with sorrow, for light to return, even if only in flickers. You don't need to pretend to be fine. You just need to remember that joy is your nature too. In daily life, this shows up in simple ways. You walk into a space with presence instead of rush. You greet people not with performance, but with stillness. You meet difficulties with curiosity instead of panic. And even when things feel heavy, you carry yourself lightly, not to minimize the weight, but to move with it rather than against it. At night, the smile without cause becomes a gentle doorway into sleep. When the day ends and nothing seems particularly remarkable, you can still choose to rest in warmth. You can feel your face soften. You can feel your breath slow. You can recall nothing special and still feel grateful. This is the secret. Joy is not the result of something happening. It's the result of not needing something else to happen. In the Bodhisattva tradition, there's a practice of visualizing others receiving your light. Even when you feel tired, even when you feel empty, you offer your presence like a quiet candle in a vast space, and that offering doesn't drain you, it replenishes you, because joy multiplies when it's given. Not big, not loud, just steady, just honest, and the more it's shared, the stronger it becomes. This kind of joy is one of the greatest acts of resistance in a world that thrives on urgency and lack. When you smile without cause, you're saying, "This moment is already complete. I don't need to wait for the next thing to feel whole. I don't need to be more to be enough. I can be kind now. I can be light now." And in that choice, a deeper strength appears. You might not change the world with a single smile, but you change the moment, and the moment changes you. So the next time nothing special is happening, smile anyway. Let your body remember what your mind has forgotten. That joy doesn't ask for credentials, that your peace doesn't need permission. You are not waiting for the perfect moment. You are the perfect moment. Quiet, grounded, and full of light. And the smile you offer, even in silence, reaches farther than you'll ever know. And when joy no longer waits for a reason, when it begins to radiate without asking for anything in return, a strange kind of silence follows, not empty, not cold, but full, a silence that doesn't demand, a silence that doesn't perform. It's not a gap to be filled, it's a sanctuary to rest in. After the smile without cause has opened the heart, there comes a deeper invitation. Let the words fall away. Let the noise collapse. Let the quiet become the teacher. This is where Buddhist stillness takes over, not as the absence of thought, but as the space that holds peace when thoughts no longer lead. Most of the day is lived in words, outer words, inner words, stories, lists, commentary. Even when no one is speaking, the mind fills the silence. And the strange thing is, this chatter feels normal. It becomes so constant that its absence can feel unfamiliar. But under all the noise, something softer has always been waiting, a stillness that doesn't need language, a clarity that doesn't need narration. Buddhist practice doesn't just point to this stillness, it lives there, because silence isn't a gap between useful things. It is itself the most useful thing of all. Self-talk is not bad by nature. It helps navigate, it plans, solves, names. But it's also where the inner critic hides, where insecurity lives, where future fears and past regrets loop without end. And the problem isn't the presence of words, it's the absence of space between them. When the internal dialogue becomes a wall of sound, there's no room left for truth to rise. That's when silence becomes medicine. Buddhism teaches that silence is not just the lack of speaking, it's a presence, a living field of awareness that doesn't need to say anything to know. And when you enter that field, something profound happens. The body begins to release its grip, the breath finds its own rhythm, and the mind, used to being in charge, starts to dissolve into the moment. Not because it was pushed out, but because it's finally met something deeper. This silence doesn't need to be long. Even a few seconds of stillness, real stillness, can change the entire tone of the nervous system. The chatter softens, the emotional charge fades, not because you figured it out, but because the need to explain it has vanished. Stillness is not an answer. It's what remains when the question drops. The power of this silence is its ability to interrupt habitual thought. Thoughts aren't the problem. The loops are. The echo chambers. The commentary that says the same thing in different words, hoping to feel something new. Buddhist meditation interrupts this without force. It simply invites you to sit, to breathe, to return. And each return is a quiet refusal to keep fueling the noise. There's a reason why monasteries prioritize silence, not just in formal practice, but in lifestyle. Because in that quiet, something forgotten returns. An awareness that can't be taught through language. A clarity that doesn't come from analysis. And a peace that doesn't depend on getting anything right. When silence is held long enough, the mind gets tired of talking. And when it stops, everything softens. Stillness doesn't erase thought. It surrounds it, makes room for it to move without crashing into itself. In that room, thoughts become clearer, wiser, less charged, because the silence holds them like a parent holds a child, not to control, but to steady. And over time, that holding rewires the nervous system. Thoughts that used to scream now whisper. Thoughts that used to race now rest. And the identity built around them begins to fall away. This transformation isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It's felt in the way breath moves differently, in the way tension lets go without being told, in the way you stop needing to explain yourself to yourself. Because silence doesn't demand explanation, it just is. And in that isness, you remember what it's like to be without having to perform being. Practicing silence means noticing the spaces between thoughts, noticing the end of the exhale, the pause before the next sentence. These aren't gaps to hurry through, they are doors. And if you linger at those thresholds, something opens. A kind of still presence that doesn't belong to the thinking mind. It's not a thought, it's not even a feeling. It's the awareness that allows both. This is why Buddhist retreats often emphasize noble silence, not as a punishment, but as a sacred invitation, because the less you speak, the more you hear. Not with your ears, but with your body, your intuition, your knowing, and that knowing doesn't speak in paragraphs. It arrives in stillness. Even at home, this silence can be practiced. Start with a few minutes in the morning. No music, no words, no goals, just presence, just breath. At first, the mind might resist. It might panic. But if you stay, if you listen, the noise begins to lose power. It reveals itself as a habit, not a necessity. And in its place, silence becomes a friend. Silence also reshapes how you interact. When you're not constantly narrating your thoughts, you listen differently. You hear the emotion under someone's words. You notice pauses. You speak less. But when you do speak, it lands with clarity, because it's not filling space, it's coming from stillness. And people feel that. At night, this stillness becomes a path to deep rest. Instead of filling the quiet with more thinking, more reviewing, more self-talk, you let the quiet remain. You let silence cradle you. You let the breath move without directing it. And sleep comes not as escape, but as a deep continuation of peace. Because the mind has been trained, even for a few minutes, to trust stillness over sound. There is a practice in Zen Buddhism called shikantaza, just sitting, no mantra, no focus object, just sitting, just being. And in that pure being, the silence isn't empty, it's full. It contains the entire world, because in the absence of striving, the presence of everything else becomes visible. The light, the body, the breath, the now. All of it held in the silence you once thought was nothing. You don't need to renounce speech to access this. You just need to notice how often you try to escape stillness. And then, gently, stop running. Turn toward it. Feel the quiet. Let it wash over you, not to achieve anything, just to remember that underneath every word, every thought, every idea, there is this space, always here, always waiting, always full. And when the chatter comes back, as it will, you don't fight it. You notice it. You let it pass, and you return again, over and over, until the silence becomes your home, not your enemy, until the mind no longer fears the quiet, until peace becomes louder than thought. This is what stillness teaches, not how to escape the mind, but how to hold it with such calm that it no longer needs to shout. And in that holding, your deepest self is revealed, not through thinking, but through being. You're not here to out-talk your thoughts. You're here to out-silence them. And when silence starts to speak louder than thought, when the mind no longer needs to fill every space with noise, what remains is a clarity that can't be found in words. That clarity doesn't bring more control. It does the opposite. It reveals the truth the mind has been trying to outrun, that some things will never bend to your will. Some outcomes will never be predictable. Some situations cannot be fixed, explained, or reversed. And in that awareness, a deeper practice begins. Not resistance, not surrender in weakness, but surrender in wisdom. The kind of surrender that frees the heart without guilt. The kind of surrender that sets you down gently in the truth of what is. This is conscious surrender. Most of what exhausts the modern mind is not doing, it's over-controlling. It's the need to manage not just tasks, but emotions, relationships, opinions, and every possible future. It's trying to carry situations that don't belong to you. It's blaming yourself for not fixing what was never yours to fix. This is where the tension lives, not in the moment, but in the illusion of responsibility. The weight of believing that if you just tried harder, thought longer, sacrificed more, everything would turn out better. But Buddhism offers a different way forward. It teaches that surrender is not the same as defeat. In fact, conscious surrender is a form of strength. Not the strength to win, but the strength to release. Not giving up, but letting go of what never belonged to you. It's not passivity, it's clarity. Because once you stop trying to control what's uncontrollable, you free up space, emotional, mental, physical, to be present with what you can actually influence, your own state of mind. This begins with a question. What are you still carrying that doesn't serve you? Not in theory, but in this moment. Is it a regret from years ago? A conflict you keep replaying? A fear about someone else's choices? A burden to prove yourself, to protect everyone, to get everything just right? The moment you name it, you start to loosen the grip, because most suffering isn't from the event. It's from the ongoing attempt to control what's already happened or what hasn't happened yet. Buddhist surrender is not giving in. It's bowing to the truth. It's recognizing that impermanence is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. Everything changes. Everything moves. And control is often the mind's way of trying to deny this. But what if control isn't safety? What if true safety comes from trust, not in a perfect outcome, but in your ability to meet whatever arises with presence? This kind of surrender doesn't erase pain. It just ends the extra pain of trying to dominate what cannot be touched. And when that effort stops, there is a deep exhale that reaches through your whole body. A quiet settling that says, I don't have to hold this anymore. That release is not abandonment, it's wisdom. The wisdom that knows your peace is more valuable than your illusion of control. There's a teaching in Buddhism called upekkha, equanimity, the ability to stay steady with all things, and conscious surrender is part of this. It's the willingness to let go of the fight with life, not to roll over, but to stop arguing with the reality that this moment is exactly what it is. That doesn't mean liking everything. It means meeting it as it is, without denial, without panic, without guilt for not changing what is unchangeable. One of the quiet poisons that blocks surrender is guilt. The belief that if something went wrong, it must be your fault. That if someone else is struggling, you failed them. That if life didn't go to plan, you're somehow to blame. But guilt, when left unchecked, becomes a leash that tethers you to control. Because if you're at fault, then fixing it becomes a moral obligation. But not everything is yours to fix. Buddhism encourages clear seeing. To look deeply into your role, your actions, your intentions, and then let go of what's beyond your reach. That doesn't mean being careless. It means being honest. There is a difference between responsibility and over-responsibility. The first is grounded. The second is soaked in fear. Conscious surrender is what untangles the two. It allows you to respond with care, but without carrying shame for what lies outside your influence. In meditation, this surrender begins as a practice of release. You notice tension in the body, shoulders, jaw, belly, and you let it soften. Not all at once, not perfectly, just one breath at a time. You feel where the mind is holding, grasping, spinning, and you gently say, "Let it be," again and again. You don't force stillness, you don't demand silence. You offer space, and in that space, the clenching stops. At night, this surrender becomes essential, because it's often in the quiet that old control patterns reawaken. The mind replays what didn't go right. It prepares for what might go wrong. And if you don't intervene with mindfulness, that spiral deepens, but surrender interrupts it. You return to the body. You feel the bed beneath you. You soften the muscles that think they need to hold the whole world. You whisper to yourself, "This can wait. This isn't mine right now." And even if nothing changes externally, the body hears the signal, and it rests. The practice of surrender also touches relationships, because much of what people suffer from is not just their own pain, but the pain of others. Wanting loved ones to heal, wanting people to change, wanting to protect everyone from their own lessons. But conscious surrender says, "I will love fully, but I will not try to control someone else's path. I can offer wisdom, I can set boundaries, but I cannot walk their road." And in that letting go, something sacred happens. The love becomes cleaner, less tangled, more peaceful. Even with your own inner growth, surrender matters. The mind wants to rush healing, to fix quickly, to become enlightened fast. But this too is a form of control. Buddhism teaches patience, not because transformation is slow, but because it cannot be forced. You water the seed, you care for the soil, but the unfolding belongs to time, not will. And surrender is what allows that growth to happen naturally, without guilt, without shame, without urgency. One of the most beautiful things about this practice is that it brings relief, not dramatic, but real. When you release false responsibility, energy returns, space returns. The breath feels deeper because it's not pushing. The body feels lighter because it's not bracing. And the mind begins to trust the present again, not because it's perfect, but because it's no longer being controlled. You begin to realize that the deepest peace does not come from mastering life. It comes from meeting it, fully, gently, honestly. And when things don't go your way, you don't collapse. You bow, not in weakness, but in reverence, because you understand now that letting go is not losing. It's returning to what you can hold and releasing what holds you back. Conscious surrender is not something you achieve once. It's a moment-by-moment decision. To loosen the grip, to trust the breath, to believe that you don't need to manage everything in order to be okay. And each time you practice it, your nervous system remembers, your body remembers, and slowly the inner war with life ends. So, if there's something tonight that still feels heavy, ask yourself, is this truly mine to carry? And if not, can I set it down? Not because it's solved, not because it's gone, but because holding it longer won't help. And if it is yours, can you hold it without guilt, without panic, without clinging to the outcome? Can you stay with it gently, like the breath, held lightly, not gripped? This is surrender. Not an escape, but a sacred return. Not silence in defeat, but peace in knowing what's real. You're allowed to rest now, even if the world is still turning, even if things are still unclear. You're allowed to soften, to trust, to release. And in that release, a deeper strength is born, one that doesn't control life, but moves with it, breath by breath, moment by moment, with calm, with wisdom, and with peace. And once the weight of over-responsibility has been released, once the quiet act of surrender creates space inside your chest, the mind becomes more fertile. Not crowded, not chaotic, but open in a way it hasn't been for a long time. That openness is not empty. It's ready. Ready to receive, ready to be shaped. Because every moment of inner calm is also a planting ground. Especially in the moments just before sleep, when thoughts start to settle and the subconscious becomes more absorbent than at any other point in the day. This is where we begin to understand karma, not just as action, but as attention. Not just external deeds, but internal seeds. The karma of thought before sleep might be subtle, but it holds immense power. Karma is often misunderstood as cosmic punishment or reward, like some kind of mystical scoreboard. But in Buddhist teaching, karma is not about judgment. It's about cause and effect. Every action, every word, every thought plants a seed. That seed doesn't sprout instantly, but it shapes the field of the mind. And the field never forgets. It doesn't need to. It stores everything quietly. Then, without warning, it grows. Not always where or how you expect, but always true to the energy that was planted. The most overlooked aspect of karma is what happens internally. People focus on what they do, what they say, how they treat others, and all of that matters deeply. But what's often missed is how you treat yourself in the invisible moments. The conversations you have with your own mind, the stories you reinforce, the beliefs you repeat. These are the seeds that shape your emotional weather. And bedtime is one of the most fertile times to plant. The moments before sleep are not throwaway minutes. They are soft, sacred transitions. The conscious mind begins to loosen. The body drops its guard. The subconscious opens its gates. And whatever you place into that space is carried through the night. That's why a single harsh thought at bedtime can echo in your dreams, and why a kind, stable thought can become a source of healing that stretches into the morning. Buddhist practice invites you to be intentional with this space, to see your last thoughts not as leftovers, but as offerings. What you offer the mind in those final minutes becomes the tone of the night, and that tone becomes the tone of the next day. If the mind is offered anxiety, fear, guilt, or resentment, it will carry those vibrations into the resting body. If the mind is offered calm, gratitude, loving kindness, or self-acceptance, those too will take root and begin to grow even while you sleep. Planting seeds is not about forcing positivity. It's about conscious choosing. Choosing which thoughts deserve your final attention, choosing which beliefs deserve to be watered, and choosing which patterns no longer need your energy. It's not a performance, it's care. The same care you'd offer a garden, You don't curse the soil, you just pull the weeds gently, and you plant what nourishes. To begin this practice, start small. Before bed, pause, even for 1 minute. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what seed do I want to plant right now? Not a goal, not a wish, but a quality. Maybe ease, maybe safety, maybe compassion. Choose one, and let the mind rest in it, not by repeating it like a mantra, but by feeling it. Let the body soften around it. Let it spread through your awareness. Let it become the last thing you offer to the night. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as recalling something that felt gentle during the day. A moment where you felt respected, calm, or seen. A moment where you felt connected. Let that memory settle into your body, not to cling, but to nourish. The mind often replays pain as a habit, but you can train it to replay joy as a medicine. Another seed to plant is gratitude, not as an obligation, but as an opening, not a list, but a feeling. One thing that felt good today, one thing that didn't go wrong, one thing that reminded you that peace is possible. You don't need to be grateful for everything, but you can be grateful for something. And that one thread of gratitude, when felt sincerely, sends a signal through your entire nervous system. It tells the body, we're safe, we can rest. That signal allows deeper sleep, fewer nightmares, a steadier waking. There's also a deep karmic effect to the way you speak to yourself before bed. The final tone of your inner voice matters. If it's harsh, the body tenses through the night. If it's kind, the body releases. So instead of reviewing mistakes or panicking about tomorrow, you can choose a softer dialogue. Something as simple as, I did my best, or I release this now, or whatever tomorrow brings, I'll meet it with presence. These phrases are not affirmations. They are seeds. They don't need to convince. They only need to be planted. And sometimes the most powerful seed is stillness. No words, just breath, just being. The absence of striving is itself a powerful imprint. Letting the last few minutes before sleep be free of effort, free of needing to be anything or solve anything, is one of the most healing things you can offer your system. It tells the deeper mind, nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added. This moment is complete. And that message is remembered long after you drift into unconsciousness. Over time, this practice rewires your relationship with sleep itself. Sleep stops being an escape and becomes a sanctuary. It becomes a time of integration, not avoidance. And in the morning, you begin to feel the effects. Not just in mood, but in resilience, in clarity, in how quickly you return to center after stress. Because the seeds you plant don't just stay in the night. They shape your next thoughts, your next reactions, your next choices. This is the quiet power of inner karma. It's not loud, it's not public, but it is transformative. The thoughts you repeat in private shape the emotions you express in public. The stories you tell yourself at night become the posture of your day, and the beliefs you rehearse before sleep become the emotional climate you wake up in. That's why this practice is not optional for deep peace. It's essential. Not as a burden, but as a gift. The mind is always growing something, and when you're not choosing what to plant, the weeds choose for you. But when you do choose, when you decide to meet yourself with care, everything changes, slowly, quietly, and completely. And none of this requires perfection. Some nights will be messy. Some thoughts will be stubborn. Some seeds will take longer to sprout. That's okay. The mind is a field that's been shaped by years of patterns. It doesn't change in one night, but it does change. And every time you pause before sleep and offer something kind, something beautiful, something peaceful, you shift the entire field. So tonight, as your body prepares to rest, ask yourself gently, what am I planting right now? And if the answer feels heavy, plant something lighter. Not because the heavy thing doesn't matter, but because it's not the only thing that's true. Let something else take root beside it. Let hope grow beside fear. Let calm grow beside uncertainty. Let love grow beside the ache of not knowing. Because in the mind field, there is always room, always time, always another chance to plant something better. And sleep, when met with care, becomes more than rest. It becomes renewal. And once you've begun planting the quiet seeds of thought at night, once you understand that your inner field responds to intention more than effort, a new kind of trust starts to emerge. Not the kind built from control, not the kind fueled by having all the answers, but a slower trust, a deeper trust. The kind that says, maybe I don't need to solve everything before sleep. Maybe my awareness is enough. Maybe the healing doesn't come from fixing, but from floating. Letting the mind rest on the surface instead of diving into the depths with urgency. This is where the practice shifts again, into the art of releasing problem-solving and resting in pure awareness. The mind wants to fix things. It's wired that way. It thinks safety comes from solutions, from wrapping everything in neat conclusions, from staying ahead of discomfort. And during the day, that tendency can help. It can create progress, structure, understanding. But at night, the same habit becomes a trap. When the lights go down and the body slows, the mind doesn't always get the message. It thinks it needs to keep going, that it has one last task, that if it can just solve this one lingering issue, rest will finally be allowed. But that's the lie, because there is no final thought, no final fix. The mind will always offer another angle, another worry, another imagined scenario. It doesn't settle through solving, it settles through surrender. That surrender begins with one choice, to stop looking for the solution and start trusting the awareness that sees the need for one. Awareness is different from thought. It doesn't argue, it doesn't demand, it doesn't insist that something be different in order to be okay. Awareness simply notices. It notices the thoughts, the tensions, the impulses to control, and it doesn't push any of them away. It just sees, and that seeing alone has power. When you rest in awareness instead of reaction, something softens. It's not that the problems disappear, it's that your relationship with them changes. They're no longer urgent emergencies. They become passing weather patterns. They're not walls, they're clouds. And just like clouds, they don't need your help to move. They drift on their own when you stop holding them in place. Floating over fixing means allowing the thoughts to rise without grabbing them. It means letting the discomfort be there without turning it into a puzzle. And it means recognizing that insight doesn't arrive through force. It arrives through space, through the pause, through the stillness you create when you stop trying to bend the mind into resolution. Buddhist meditation teaches this in the simplest of ways. You sit, you breathe, thoughts come. You don't chase them, you don't answer them. You let them float. And what you find, again and again, is that the more you allow, the more the thoughts dissolve. Not because you outsmarted them, but because you didn't feed them. You watched, and they passed. That watching becomes your superpower at night. When the mind says, "What if this doesn't work out?" or "Why did that happen?" or "How do I fix this?" you breathe, you listen, and then you return to presence, not to deny the question, but to remember that answers don't arise in tension, they arise in space, in openness, in the mind that's not racing to control. This doesn't mean ignoring responsibility, it means knowing when responsibility turns into obsession. It means drawing the line between what needs to be done and what the mind is doing out of habit. And bedtime is the perfect time to draw that line, because the work of the night is different. It's not about fixing, it's about integrating, healing, repairing from within. And none of that requires control, it requires letting go. One of the gentlest ways to enter this practice is to name the problem and then release it. You can say to yourself, "This is here, I feel it, I acknowledge it, and now I release the need to solve it tonight." That single phrase interrupts the loop. It creates a soft boundary, not to shut the mind down, but to guide it back to rest. Trusting awareness is not about giving up. It's about trusting that rest itself is useful. That insight doesn't always come in the form of clear thoughts. Sometimes it arrives as dreams, as a calmer nervous system, as a new perspective in the morning that you couldn't reach through effort. Floating allows these things to rise. Fixing strangles them before they can appear. And here's something surprising. Most of the answers people look for at night aren't needed until morning. The urgency is a trick of the mind, a way to avoid stillness. But if you resist that trick, even for a few breaths, you begin to see it clearly. The thoughts aren't real-time emergencies. They're echoes, mental habits, and awareness sees them without becoming them. This awareness becomes stronger each time you practice it. Each time you notice a loop and don't follow it. Each time you feel the urge to analyze and instead you breathe. Each time you watch a thought pass without grabbing it. These moments are small, but they add up. And the more often you float, the less the mind believes it needs to fix everything. Floating also heals the body, because the nervous system can't tell the difference between real danger and imagined problem-solving. When you think with tension, the body responds with adrenaline, with cortisol, with shallow breath and clenched muscles. But when you rest in awareness, the body recalibrates. It enters the parasympathetic state, rest and digest. This is where true sleep begins, where the body does its deepest repair. At first, the floating might feel uncomfortable, like you're not doing enough, like you're ignoring something important. But that's just the mind reacting to a new habit. And habits don't shift instantly. You stay with it. You let the discomfort be part of the floating. You let the need to fix be something you observe, not something you obey. And slowly, something changes. The thoughts lose urgency. The body learns to relax without closure. And the breath becomes your anchor. Not because you made everything right, but because you stopped trying to. This practice also teaches humility. It reminds you that you're not supposed to have all the answers, that some clarity only comes when you're not looking for it. And that's okay. You're not failing by not fixing. You're healing by resting. And healing is what creates true solutions, not the frantic kind, but the kind that lasts. As the night deepens, you return again and again to presence, to breath, to body. You say gently, "I don't need to know right now. I only need to be." And that being becomes your freedom. It becomes your safety. Because it's not built on control, it's built on surrender. And in that surrender, the mind finally understands. Awareness is enough. So tonight, let yourself float. Let the thoughts be there without fixing. Let the feelings rise without analyzing. Let awareness hold it all without needing to change it. Because in the space where nothing is forced, everything can unfold, quietly, naturally, and exactly when it's ready. And once the mind stops gripping for answers, once it learns to float instead of fix, what's left is a quiet kind of openness. That openness doesn't ask for more thoughts. It waits, it watches, and sometimes what it sees next can be uncomfortable. Not external problems, but internal residue, feelings not fully processed, words you've spoken to yourself that still sting, judgments that never got washed away. And in the stillness, these smudges rise to the surface of your awareness, not to punish you, not to shame you, but to be seen clearly, to be wiped clean, gently, with something stronger than self-criticism, something softer, something honest. This is where self-compassion becomes a mirror cloth for the mind. The mind is like a mirror. It reflects what is. It holds memories, impressions, reactions, and over time it becomes clouded by those impressions. Like fingerprints on glass, each harsh thought, each suppressed feeling, each unkind judgment leaves a mark. And when there are too many, it becomes harder to see clearly. You don't just misperceive the world, you misperceive yourself. You start to believe the smudges are part of the glass, that the distortion is the truth. But it's not. The truth is always there, beneath the marks. And what removes them is not perfection or punishment, it's compassion. Self-compassion is often misunderstood as indulgence, as letting yourself off the hook. But in Buddhism, it is seen as a crucial part of inner clarity. Without it, there is no honest seeing, because when the mind is harsh, it avoids truth out of fear. It protects itself with blame and distraction. But when the mind is kind, it can look directly at itself. It can hold its own imperfections without collapsing. It can say, "Yes, this hurts. Yes, I did that. Yes, I'm still worthy." That kind of clarity cleans the mirror, not by scrubbing harder, but by wiping with care. The power of self-compassion is especially strong before sleep, because during the day, your defenses are up, your roles are active, your attention is pulled outward, but at night, everything softens. The subconscious becomes more available, and in that softness, harshness echoes louder. If you go to sleep steeped in self-judgment, it settles into your nervous system like a stain. But if you meet yourself with compassion, true, honest compassion, something else happens. The nervous system releases, the breath deepens, and the mind begins to heal itself from the inside out. This doesn't mean sugarcoating your mistakes. It means holding them with warmth instead of shame. Shame freezes the mind. Compassion melts it. not into weakness, but into flexibility. And that flexibility is where change begins. Because real transformation doesn't come from self-attack. It comes from self-trust. You don't grow because you hate where you are. You grow because you believe you're worth tending to. Practicing this isn't about saying nice things to yourself just to feel better. It's about being real. It's about noticing where you're still carrying pain that hasn't been named, where you're still criticizing yourself for something long past, where you're still trying to earn your own approval. And then, in that moment of recognition, choosing to soften. Choosing to speak to yourself not as a project, but as a person. You can do this through gentle phrases, not affirmations you don't believe, but simple truths. That was hard today. I didn't know what else to do. I'm still learning. These words, when felt sincerely, act like warm water over a cold mind. They don't change the facts, but they change the environment in which the facts are held. And that change is what begins to clear the mirror. This is especially important for old patterns, habits of thought that have become reflex, the voice that says, "I'm not enough. I always mess up. No one really sees me." These voices don't disappear through logic. They dissolve through kindness, through repeated experiences of being met without attack. And since you can't always depend on the outside world for that, you learn to offer it to yourself. Not once, but again and again. Over time, this becomes a nightly ritual. Just before sleep, you scan gently, not to judge, but to care. You notice what still feels tight, what still feels unresolved, and instead of rushing to fix it, you place your awareness there like a warm hand. This hurts, and I'm here. I see you, and you're not alone. These phrases sound simple, but they're profound, because they interrupt the old conditioning that says you must be harsh to grow. That only guilt creates change. That shame is the same as accountability. It's not. Compassion is accountability without violence. When you offer this to yourself, your sleep changes. The body feels safer. The mind feels held. And even if nothing gets solved, you enter rest with less resistance. And in that state, healing deepens. Dreams soften. The subconscious lets go of old knots, because it no longer feels like it's being punished in the dark. This practice also helps with the voice inside that tries to reject compassion. The one that says, "I don't deserve that," or "It's too late." When that voice arises, you don't fight it. You include it. You say, "Even you are allowed to be here." You let compassion touch even the part of you that doesn't believe in it. And over time, that part starts to soften too. Self-compassion is not just a technique. It's a relationship, a way of being with yourself. And like any relationship, it grows with time. You might forget, you might resist, but the more often you return to it, the more natural it becomes. Until eventually, it's no longer a practice. It's a way of moving through the world, through failure, through success, through ordinary moments, with less tension, with more honesty, with peace. There's a phrase in Buddhism that says, "Compassion is the quivering of the heart when it meets suffering." That includes your suffering, your old regrets, your unspoken fears, your unmet needs. When your heart can quiver for itself, not in pity but in presence, you've begun the real work of liberation. At night, let this be the final energy you invite in. Not another task, not another demand, just presence, just warmth, just the willingness to meet yourself where you are, without running, without explaining, without needing to be perfect first. That meeting is the wiping of the mirror. That meeting is the healing. And as the mind clears, what you begin to see isn't more flaws, it's your own light. The light that was always there, underneath the smudges. Not because you earned it, but because you stopped covering it with punishment. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're just learning how to see clearly again. And tonight, self-compassion is the cloth that helps you remember. And after wiping the smudges from the mind with self-compassion, after finally letting yourself be met with gentleness instead of judgment, what remains is a softness you may not recognize at first, a stillness not wrapped in fear, a quiet that feels less like absence and more like presence. But the heart, especially one that's been hardened by years of pressure, doesn't always know how to trust this peace. So it needs something symbolic, something steady, something sacred. That's where visualization becomes more than imagination. It becomes healing. Because tonight, you don't have to sleep alone in your mind. You can sleep beside the Buddha. This isn't about belief or religion. It's about nervous system language. The mind doesn't need doctrine. It needs safety. It needs symbols that calm, rhythms that soothe, images that carry peace deeper than logic. And the presence of the Buddha in this practice is not an external God. It is a field of awareness, a calm intelligence, a radiant presence that sits beside you, not to fix, not to judge, but simply to be with you. The idea of sleeping with the Buddha is simple but powerful. It's the practice of inviting an enlightened presence, one that's pure calm, pure compassion, pure wisdom, into the space of your rest. Not just as a symbol on a wall, but as a presence in your subconscious. A field of quiet, knowing that stays with you as your thoughts dissolve and your body begins to fade into sleep. Before you begin, let the body settle. Let the breath lengthen. Let the room be still. And in that stillness, call to mind the image of the Buddha, not as a statue, not as a distant ideal, but as a calm being seated next to you, their posture relaxed, their gaze kind, their presence unshakably peaceful. There's no need to make this perfect. Just feel it. Let the idea form naturally. Let the energy of that presence begin to settle around you like warm air. Now notice how the body reacts. Not what the mind says, but what the body does. Does the breath slow? Do the shoulders drop? Do the thoughts soften just a little? This is the nervous system responding to the presence of calm. And you're not making this up. You're remembering something ancient, something the body knows but often forgets. That it is allowed to rest in the presence of wisdom. The Buddha does not speak. He does not teach in words. His presence is the teaching. His silence is the message. He sits beside you with full awareness and zero judgment. He knows your suffering. He knows your restlessness. And he does not need you to be anything other than what you are. His presence accepts everything, and that acceptance begins to teach your body how to do the same. With this visualization, the space around you begins to shift. The air feels safer. The thoughts feel less important. You're no longer the only one holding yourself through the night. There is support here, not in the form of solutions, but in the form of presence. Steady, unwavering presence, and the subconscious begins to listen. As you continue to breathe, let yourself lean into this energy. Let your weight shift slightly in your imagination toward this calm being, this silent field of peace. Not because you're seeking comfort, but because the body wants to remember how to rest, how to let go, how to trust that being held doesn't require explanation. The more you return to this visualization, the deeper the subconscious begins to associate rest with safety. And the deeper that association becomes, the less effort it takes. The nervous system starts to recognize this presence as a signal, a turning point, a transition from effort to ease. And just like a child calms when held by someone who is calm, your body begins to entrain to the energy of the Buddha. Not metaphorically, physiologically. This practice works even if the image is vague, even if you don't know exactly what you're seeing. It's not the clarity of the picture, it's the clarity of the energy, the tone, the feeling, the stability of knowing that you are not alone inside your own mind tonight, that the field beside you holds wisdom beyond words, and that wisdom is not afraid of anything you bring to bed. You may notice thoughts rise as this presence settles in. Old worries, old stories, old tensions. That's natural. They rise not to disturb you, but to be soothed. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to argue. You just let them pass through the space between you and this presence. Let them move between your breath and his calm gaze. Let them dissolve in the silence that holds you both. Over time, this visualization becomes more than a technique. It becomes a doorway, a way of exiting the tight box of self-protection and entering a room where everything is seen, everything is held, and nothing is judged. That room is the space of awakened awareness, and the more often you visit it, the easier it becomes to live there. This practice is especially powerful for the part of you that feels alone, the part that carries too much, that thinks it's responsible for everything, that feels like peace is something that must be earned. Because the Buddha's presence teaches something without words. Peace is already here. It was never outside you. You just forgot how to touch it. This doesn't mean the Buddha solves your problems. It means you stop needing every problem solved in order to sleep. You stop needing to be healed before you can rest. You stop needing to understand everything before you can surrender. Because in this space, peace is not the result of fixing, it's the result of being. And even when you forget this presence, it doesn't leave. It lives in the breath, in the stillness between thoughts, in the silence behind your worries. You can return to it with a single exhale, with a single soft thought. I'm not alone in this mind tonight. You can even give this presence a gesture. Maybe he places a hand over your heart. Maybe he simply sits beside you, unmoving. Maybe he mirrors your breath until you forget which one of you is breathing. However you feel it, trust it. This is not fantasy. It's nervous system memory. It's spiritual architecture, and it's ancient. So let yourself drift now. Let the image fade if it wants to, or stay. There is no right way. The only instruction is this: Allow the presence of enlightened calm to hold you as you rest. Let the mind stop leading. Let awareness lead instead. Let the body remember what it's like to be safe in stillness. And when sleep finally comes, let it come inside that sacred presence. Let your dreams arise from that peace. Let your healing begin from that safety. Because tonight, you are not falling into unconsciousness. You are being held in luminous silence. This is what it means to sleep with the Buddha. Not beside a person. Beside peace itself. And after resting beside the calm presence of enlightened peace, after letting go of the pressure to fix, after remembering that safety lives in stillness, a deeper strength starts to rise quietly from within. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need recognition. It simply stands, strong, calm, present. This isn't the loud strength the world rewards. It's not the kind that overpowers or forces. It's the kind that sees pain and doesn't run. The kind that speaks gently when the mind is loud. The kind that stands in the storm without needing to push it away. This is the gentle warrior within, and this next practice helps you hear that voice again, not as fantasy, but as a real inner courage that already lives in you. For many people, the first voice they hear inside is harsh. It comments, it critiques, it compares, it tells stories that are meant to protect, but often end up hurting. You're not doing enough. You should be better by now. What's wrong with you? These phrases become so normal that their damage is invisible. They don't sound aggressive, but they erode the soul quietly. They drain confidence. They dull presence. And over time, they form a background noise that feels impossible to escape. But Buddhist practice doesn't try to fight this inner voice with more noise. It doesn't shout over the critic. It doesn't shame the shamer. It does something more powerful. It listens, not to agree, but to understand. To see clearly what the voice is trying to protect. To meet the fear underneath with clarity instead of anger. Because what harsh self-talk really is, more often than not, is scared talk. It's the mind trying to stay safe by staying small, trying to avoid pain by rehearsing it first. That's where the gentle warrior comes in. A presence within that doesn't attack the pain, but refuses to bow to it. A voice that doesn't speak from perfection, but from steadiness, from a kind of inner resilience that doesn't need permission to exist. This voice doesn't need to be loud, it only needs to be consistent, and the more it's practiced, the more it replaces the old narratives with new ones. Ones rooted not in fear, but in truth. To cultivate this voice, begin by noticing when the inner critic appears. Not to silence it, but to pause, to step back. You hear the thought, "I'm not doing enough," and instead of reacting, you breathe, you listen, and then you ask, "Is that really true?" Or, "Would I say that to someone I love?" These questions create space, and in that space, the gentle warrior has room to speak. The warrior voice doesn't say, "Everything's perfect." It says, "This is hard, and I can handle it." It says, "I've fallen before, and I got back up." It says, "I am not my worst moment." These are not motivational slogans. They are reminders, anchors. They root you back into a deeper part of yourself that knows how to keep going, not with force, but with steadiness. This practice is not about pretending to be fearless. It's about learning how to move with fear without collapsing. Buddhist courage is not about being above emotion. It's about staying present with emotion without letting it take over. That's the warrior's path, not the path of aggression, but the path of presence. The one who feels everything and still chooses to return, still chooses to speak gently, still chooses to stay. At night, this becomes especially important, because that's when the harsh voice often gets louder. When the mind is quiet, old patterns rise, and if you're not careful, the last words you hear before sleep are the ones that hurt. But this can be changed. You can meet that voice with a new one. One that says, "You've done enough for today," or "You don't have to be perfect to be worthy." These words might feel unfamiliar at first, but the more you hear them, the more you believe them. The gentle warrior also teaches boundaries, not just with others, but with your own mind. It knows when to say, "That thought doesn't belong here," not by pushing it away, but by refusing to feed it. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every story deserves your belief. And the warrior knows how to walk away from what no longer serves, without guilt, without drama. Just calm, clear refusal. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's maturity. The maturity to know the difference between self-inquiry and self-harm. The difference between honest reflection and emotional self-punishment. The gentle warrior can look at the truth without turning it into a weapon. It sees clearly without making the clarity cruel. And in that, real healing becomes possible. Over time, this voice becomes your inner guide. Not the kind that promises happiness all the time, but the kind that promises not to abandon you in the hard moments. The kind that says, "You're still here. That's enough." The kind that whispers strength when everything else is falling apart. You can practice this in small ways. When you make a mistake, pause, notice the first thought, then choose a new one. "That didn't go how I wanted, but I'm learning." When you feel overwhelmed, pause. "I'm allowed to rest." When you doubt your path, pause. "I don't need to have it all figured out tonight." These moments are where the warrior speaks, not with armor, but with presence, not with certainty, but with care. This also changes how you respond to others, because the more gently you speak to yourself, the more gently you speak to the world. You stop needing others to validate your worth. You stop reacting from a place of inner attack, and you begin to offer the same calm resilience to people around you, not by fixing them, but by being a steady presence in their storm. The gentle warrior within doesn't always look brave. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like crying without shame. But underneath all of that is a strength deeper than fear. A strength that says, "I can feel this, I can be with this, and I can keep going." This kind of strength is not built overnight. It's built in small choices, in thousands of moments where you replace the old story with a new one, where you choose presence over panic, where you choose compassion over critique, and where you learn, slowly, steadily, that your strength was never in your ability to fight. It was in your ability to stay kind. So tonight, if the harsh voice comes back, meet it, not with fire, not with resistance, just with the quiet voice that says, "I see you, but I choose something else now." That's the warrior's voice, calm, soft, unshakable. And it lives in you. And once the inner warrior has found its voice, once self-kindness replaces the need for inner attack, something unexpected starts to shift. You no longer feel like you have to earn your place in the world through perfection. The constant need to prove begins to dissolve. The pressure to get it right, to win, to control every outcome starts to lose its grip. And in that quiet release, another truth rises to the surface. Peace isn't found in the results, it's found in your relationship to them. This is where we enter the practice of joyful detachment from outcomes. A lesson in freedom the world rarely teaches, but one that Buddhism has whispered for centuries. Every day, most people act from a place of measurement. The decision to work, speak, move, rest, or even care is filtered through a lens of, "What will I get from this?" Results become the driver. Effort is only seen as valuable if it leads to recognition, reward, or success. But underneath that way of living is a mind quietly cracking under the pressure, because outcomes are unpredictable. No matter how hard you try, there are factors you can't control. And when all your happiness is attached to those results, you end up at the mercy of things you were never meant to hold. Buddhist philosophy offers something radically different. It teaches that effort itself is enough. That intention, pure, honest, grounded, is a complete act. Karma, in its truest sense, is not a scoreboard. It's a cycle, a movement. Every action plants a seed. But you don't control the weather. You don't control the timing. You only control the planting. And when you truly understand that, peace returns. Joyful detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you show up fully, wholeheartedly, with presence and purpose, and then you let go. You give your best without tying your worth to what happens next. You rest in the doing, not in the outcome. And that shift doesn't make you lazy. It makes you free. This kind of detachment isn't numbness. It's clarity. It's knowing the difference between what's yours and what isn't. Your effort is yours. Your values are yours. Your integrity is yours. The results? They're not. They never were. And letting go of that illusion doesn't weaken you. It makes you powerful, because your energy stops leaking into anxiety and starts fueling grounded, meaningful action. To practice this, you begin by watching the moments when your mind starts measuring. You catch the voice that says, "Will this be good enough? Will they notice? What if I fail?" And instead of chasing those thoughts, you pause. You return to your breath. You ask yourself, "What am I here to give?" Not to get, but to give. And you anchor into that. When you focus on the giving, the moment opens. You become more present. You feel more alive. And you act from a place of wholeness, not desperation. That wholeness is what Buddhist teachings call right effort. It's not the effort of pushing, it's the effort of alignment. Of knowing why you're doing what you're doing and being okay even if it leads somewhere unexpected. This is especially important at night, because as the day ends, the mind often starts reviewing what worked, what didn't, what needs to change. That reflection can be helpful, but when it turns into judgment, into a list of wins and losses, it becomes suffering. Joyful detachment means ending the day not with a report card, but with a bow. I showed up. I stayed honest. I tried. That's enough. And when that's truly enough, something else rises. Joy. Not the joy of winning, but the joy of being. The joy of knowing you stayed aligned. That you didn't betray yourself for results. That you gave what you had and let the rest unfold. This also changes your relationships. When you release attachment to how people respond, when you stop needing approval, recognition, or control over their feelings, you love more purely. You listen more fully. You stop trying to manage others and start meeting them. And that presence builds connection that outcomes never could. Even your goals shift. You still work. You still grow. But the fuel changes. You're no longer climbing to escape yourself. You're moving forward because movement is part of being alive. And each step becomes the reward. Not the finish line, but the process. The experience of walking your path without dragging the weight of expectation behind you. This doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means your dreams become lighter. They inspire rather than burden. They guide without enslaving. And you learn to hold them the way you hold a bird in your hand, gently, with open fingers. Letting them breathe. Letting them go if they need to. Trusting that if the flight is meant for you, it will come back. And if it doesn't, something better will grow in its place. One of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism is this: let go of the fruits of your actions. That doesn't mean don't care about results. It means don't attach your identity to them. Don't let success inflate you or failure define you. You are not your outcomes. You are the awareness behind them, the steady flame that keeps showing up no matter what the world reflects back. This kind of detachment also reduces fear, because most fear comes from the unknown, from what might happen if things don't go your way. But when you stop tying your peace to results, the fear has nowhere to land. You're not afraid of failing anymore, because failure is no longer a threat to your worth. It's just another part of the path. At night, this practice becomes a softening, a reminder that your effort was enough, that the seed you planted today may not bloom tomorrow, but it was still sacred, that you don't need to chase, fix, or grasp for validation. You can rest, you can breathe, you can let the world move without trying to hold it still. And over time, you begin to live like this. You begin to speak without rehearsing, act without performing, give without fearing lack. You stop measuring your life by external outcomes and start measuring it by inner alignment, by how fully you showed up, by how often you returned to presence, by how kindly you spoke to yourself when things didn't go as planned. Joyful detachment doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming wise. It means knowing that the more you let go, the more life flows. The more you release, the more you receive. And the more you trust the timing of things, the more peace becomes your constant companion. So tonight, let go gently. Let go not because you're tired, but because you're finally clear. Let go because you've done your part, because you don't need to carry the future on your shoulders anymore. Let the seed rest in the soil. Let the roots find their own way. Trust the unfolding, because joy, true joy, doesn't come from what happens. It comes from how you meet what happens. With presence, with courage, and with a heart unchained from results. And after detaching from outcomes, after letting go of the pressure to control what comes next, something begins to stir beneath the surface. A new kind of space opens up. Space where thoughts once raced to predict, protect, and prove. But even as you learn to loosen your grip on results, there's still something that lingers. Thoughts that feel heavy. Emotions that echo long after the moment has passed. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. And here, in this quiet aftermath, comes one of the most important shifts of all, learning how to transform those negative thoughts, not by escaping them, but by recycling them into wisdom, turning mental clutter into clarity. This is where growth doesn't just happen, it's created from what once weighed you down. Buddhism doesn't promise a life free of negative thoughts. The mind will always produce them. That's what it does. It reacts, it remembers, it predicts. But Buddhism does teach that those thoughts are not the enemy. They're not signs of failure. They're opportunities. If met with presence, each difficult thought becomes material. And like compost in a garden, what looks like waste can feed something beautiful if it's seen with the right eyes. The first step in this kind of transformation is observation. Before you can recycle anything, you have to recognize it. Most people either resist their negative thoughts or get swallowed by them. They try to fight, suppress, ignore, or they identify with the voice completely, believing every word. But there's another way, the middle path, the Buddhist path, the way of watching without fusing, seeing a thought arise and naming it gently. This is fear. This is judgment. This is shame. Without flinching, without adding a story, just seeing clearly. That clarity alone begins the transformation, because when something is named without resistance, it loses its power. It stops being a shadow and becomes a shape. And once it has a shape, you can hold it, you can examine it, you can start to understand it, not with analysis, but with awareness. The next step is inquiry, not interrogation, but curiosity. Where did this thought come from? What is it protecting me from? Is there something true underneath it, or just something familiar? This curiosity isn't to fix or judge, it's to learn, because every negative thought is carrying information. Not always about the world, but about the inner world, about needs unmet, fears unspoken, stories inherited. And when you listen with compassion, you begin to see the roots. From here, reinterpretation becomes possible. This is not about sugarcoating. It's not about flipping the thought into a forced positive affirmation. It's about seeing it through a wider lens, a Buddhist lens, one that recognizes impermanence, interdependence, the non-fixed nature of self. For example, if the thought is, "I always mess things up," you can pause and reinterpret. This is a moment of pain, not a permanent truth. There is a part of me that feels like a failure, but that part is not all of me. Or if the thought is, "No one cares about me," you can soften into, "This is the voice of loneliness. It's real, but it's not reality. I am feeling disconnected, but connection is still possible." These reinterpretations aren't fake. They're clarifications. They clear away the dust so you can see what's underneath. Each time you do this, you're not just avoiding negativity, you're alchemizing it. You're turning reactivity into reflection, pain into perspective, Each thought becomes a doorway, not a wall. And the more you walk through those doors, the stronger your insight becomes. This process also rewires the mind. Neuroscience confirms what Buddhism has taught for centuries. The thoughts you revisit become the pathways your brain favors. And when you recycle negativity with presence and reinterpretation, you start creating new pathways. Not ones built on denial, but ones rooted in clarity. Your baseline shifts from reactivity to responsiveness, from suffering to wisdom. This also changes how you relate to your past. Regret, guilt, embarrassment. They all come from old thoughts that haven't been processed. They linger because they were never seen through the lens of growth. But when you revisit those memories with this new approach, something shifts. You can say, "I see now what I didn't know then," or "That version of me was in pain, not broken." And that re-seeing allows release. Not forgetting, but understanding. And understanding heals. At night, this practice becomes a clearing ritual. You notice what thoughts are still circling, the ones that feel unresolved, the ones that tighten your chest. And instead of running from them or trying to silence them, you sit with them. You say, "What are you here to show me?" Not from fear, but from compassion. And the thought, now seen, begins to soften. Sometimes the thought doesn't give a clear answer. That's okay. Sometimes it just wants to be seen, and in that seeing, its energy changes. The mind no longer has to grip it. The body no longer has to brace against it. And sleep becomes deeper because the weight has been acknowledged. This process also brings more emotional maturity, because you stop needing every thought to be perfect. You stop trying to curate your mind. You realize that negative thoughts are part of the landscape, but they don't define the weather. They pass. They evolve. And when met with presence, they even teach. Recycling negativity doesn't mean embracing suffering. It means using what arises to understand yourself more deeply. It means not wasting pain, not letting discomfort just pass through, but turning it into fuel, into clarity, into compassion. And this isn't just about personal healing. The more you practice this internally, the more skillful you become with others. You recognize their negativity as familiar. You don't react to their anger or fear. You see it. You hold it the way you've learned to hold your own. And that holding creates space. Space for connection. Space for change. This kind of inner work is subtle, but it builds resilience that nothing can touch. Because now, even in the midst of difficulty, you know that growth is still possible, that clarity is still available, that even your worst moments can be compost for the most beautiful insights. So, tonight, let your mind speak freely, not to indulge negativity, but to give it room to be seen. Let each heavy thought be held in the hands of your awareness. Let each fear be named. Let each judgment be met with curiosity. And then choose gently to reinterpret, to reframe, to replant the energy into something new. You're not here to control every thought. You're here to meet them, to listen, to learn, and to turn what once felt like a burden into a source of light. This is mental recycling. This is how the mind becomes a garden. Not by erasing the weeds, but by turning them into nourishment. Thought by thought, breath by breath, you grow. And once negative thoughts have been seen, softened, and gently transformed into clarity, a new kind of quiet begins to settle in. Not just the absence of pain, but the presence of something deeper. It's not made from effort. It's not built from affirmations. It simply appears, like a gentle hush after a storm. A peace not made of thoughts, but of what exists between them. That soft and sacred space is often missed, but it's always there, just beneath the noise, just beyond the last word. This is the bliss in the gap, and the deeper you rest into it, the more you discover that calm doesn't need to be created, it only needs to be noticed. Most people think peace is something that has to be achieved, something you build by stacking enough good habits or thinking enough positive thoughts. But Buddhist meditation reveals a different truth. Peace is already here, beneath the movement, beneath the thinking. It's not the product of stillness, it is stillness itself. It's the silence between the sentences, the pause between the inhale and exhale, the tiny moment between one thought ending and the next beginning. These moments seem small, almost invisible, but they are the doorway to something vast. The challenge is not that these gaps don't exist. It's that the mind is trained to rush past them, to fill them, to never let silence linger long enough for truth to emerge. Thought after thought, the mind builds a wall of mental noise, and the space behind it is forgotten. But with awareness, with gentle observation, those cracks start to widen. And what slips through is not emptiness, but calm. The first step in accessing this space is learning to slow down, not the body, but attention. Watching the rhythm of your thoughts without getting pulled into them, sitting quietly and noticing the mind's pattern. It jumps, it narrates, it replays. But if you stay still long enough, you'll notice something strange. There's a flicker between the thoughts, a pause, a blank moment that can't be described. That's the gap. It's not long, it doesn't last, but it's real, and it holds more calm than any sentence ever could. Buddhist meditation often focuses on this space, not to hold on to it, but to remember it, to become familiar with it. Because the more familiar it becomes, the more your mind starts to settle into it, like slipping into a warm bath, not to drown, but to dissolve the constant drive to explain, to name, to fix. The space between thoughts holds no labels, no agenda, and that's why it feels like freedom. You can begin noticing this space during everyday life, while drinking tea, walking slowly, watching the sun shift across the floor. These moments don't require effort, they require attention. And in that attention, the mind naturally slows. The gaps between thoughts lengthen. You're not trying to stop the thoughts, you're simply resting in the space that's already there when they fall silent for a moment. At night, this practice becomes especially powerful. As the body softens and the mind begins to drift, the gaps appear more often. Between memories, between anxieties, even between the words of your internal monologue. And if you're aware, you can rest in those moments like stepping stones into sleep. You don't need to force them, just notice, just allow. This space is not boring, it's not blank, it's alive, it hums with clarity, it vibrates with peace. Because it's not made of thought, it's the awareness that holds thought, and that awareness is untouched by the content of the mind. Joy, sadness, fear, planning. All of it rises and falls within the space, but the space itself is unchanged. As you rest in this space more often, something begins to shift. You start to identify less with the thoughts and more with the awareness. You stop believing every sentence the mind speaks. You begin to understand that not all thoughts need your attention, that most of them are echoes, habits, and that underneath them is something deeper, something real. This doesn't mean you reject thinking. Thoughts are useful, necessary, but they are not you. They are not your peace. They are only waves, and beneath those waves is an ocean, silent, still, holding everything without clinging to anything. Even the breath becomes a doorway to this space. At the end of the exhale, there is a pause, a natural stillness before the next breath rises. That pause is the gap, and if you rest your attention there, even for a few seconds, you will feel it. The body relaxes, the chest opens, the thoughts quiet. Not because you silenced them, but because you entered a space where they are no longer needed. This practice also brings perspective, because when you spend time in the gap, you begin to see how temporary every thought is, how fast they come and go. And when you see that, you stop holding on to them so tightly. You stop identifying with every fear, every doubt, every reaction. You realize this too will pass, because it always does, because it always has. And in that realization, peace is no longer fragile. It becomes your baseline, your home. You carry it with you, not because you created it, but because you stopped covering it up. There's a phrase in Buddhist teaching, the silence before the word is the sound of truth. That silence is what lives in the gap. It doesn't speak, it doesn't argue, but it communicates something unmistakable, that you are already whole, that nothing is missing in this moment, that peace is not something you earn, it's something you return to. You don't have to make this complicated. The next time you sit or walk or lie down, just begin to notice the edges, the quiet after a thought ends, the space before the next one begins. Stay there, even for a breath, even for a blink, and let that stillness teach you what no book ever could. This practice doesn't need perfect posture or hours of meditation. It needs presence, it needs curiosity, and it needs the willingness to stop filling every gap with something to do, something to say, something to solve. The more you rest in the space, the more you trust it, and the more you trust it, the more it reveals itself, until eventually the gap is no longer just a moment. It becomes a way of seeing, a way of being, a place you carry with you. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to slow, notice the stillness between them. Notice the space between your breaths, the pause before a dream begins, and let yourself float there. Let yourself rest in the calm that's already waiting for you, not at the end of thinking, but in the spaces in between. This is bliss in the gap, and it's always been yours. And as you begin to feel the stillness that lives between thoughts, as you taste the quiet truth hiding in each pause, a deeper realization emerges. It's not just the silence that brings peace, it's the absence of striving. The mind isn't calm simply because it's quiet. It's calm because, for once, it isn't reaching. Not reaching for the next solution, the next moment, the next improvement. In the space between thoughts, there's no chase. And in that space, something radical can finally be seen clearly. This moment, exactly as it is already enough. Not because it's perfect, not because it meets all your hopes, but because the need for more was always the barrier to peace. This next teaching reveals that truth in its most luminous form, the radiance of enough. The human mind is conditioned to want, to stretch forward, to imagine what's missing. This impulse isn't evil, it's natural. It helped our ancestors survive, build and improve. But it also created a loop that says happiness is somewhere else, somewhere just out of reach. I'll feel peace when I achieve this. I'll feel joy when I fix that. I'll finally relax once I've earned it. And so the chase begins, and never ends. But Buddhist wisdom doesn't follow that path. It stops. It turns around. It looks at the moment directly and says, "This is it." Not in resignation, but in reverence. Because what makes this moment enough isn't its contents. It's your willingness to meet it without demands. The realization of enough doesn't mean nothing should change. It doesn't mean complacency. It means your peace no longer depends on change. You still move, you still grow, but not from lack, not from the belief that something is missing. You act from fullness, not from hunger, and that shift is everything. This practice starts with presence, noticing the moment without adding anything to it, sitting, breathing, feeling, and letting go of the story that something else is needed right now. That story is the source of tension. Even in peaceful moments, it whispers, more would be better. But the moment you stop chasing better, you meet the richness already here. The mind often resists this. It believes that if you stop striving, you'll become lazy or lost, that you'll lose your edge. But that belief is rooted in fear, not truth. In reality, people who rest in enoughness aren't passive, they're powerful, because their energy isn't scattered, their actions are clear, their presence is strong, they're not chasing peace, they're embodying it. To begin practicing this, notice how often your mind says, not yet, almost, just a little more. Then pause, breathe, ask yourself, what if nothing changed right now? Could this moment still be whole? You might not hear a clear yes, but in the pause, in the asking, something settles, something lets go. You can also use the senses to enter enoughness. Feel the air on your skin, the weight of your body, the sound around you. These details are always here, but overlooked. When you pay attention to them without judgment, you're training the mind to receive instead of reach. And receiving is how enoughness becomes real. This also shifts how you relate to the future. Instead of racing toward it, you walk with it. You don't demand that it complete you. You let it unfold without desperation. That trust reduces anxiety, because the belief that the future must deliver something specific is the root of so much stress. But when you stop needing the next thing to save you, the present begins to shine. In Buddhist terms, this is called santuti, contentment. It's a radical state of peace that comes not from getting more, but from no longer needing more. It's not apathy. It's not detachment from life. It's intimacy with life. Being so fully connected to what is that you stop trying to rearrange it constantly. This also changes your self-perception. You stop measuring yourself by progress alone. You begin to see that worth isn't tied to improvement, that you are not a project to be perfected. You are already a whole being, unfolding. You can evolve without the harshness of never feeling good enough, because you've remembered something sacred. You don't need to become more to be worthy of peace. Even relationships are touched by this. When you no longer depend on others to fill the sense of not enough, you love more freely. You listen without trying to extract. You give without hidden expectations. And you receive without guilt. That creates space for genuine connection, not based on filling each other's emptiness, but on sharing your mutual fullness. At night, this practice becomes a form of release. As your day ends, the mind may want to evaluate, calculate, or regret. But you can offer it a new instruction. This day was enough. Not perfect, not everything you hoped, but enough to rest, enough to let go. And when you rest from that place, sleep becomes deeper. Dreams become kinder, because the body stops bracing against what wasn't finished. This doesn't mean you never strive again, but the striving is different. It's cleaner. It's not desperation, it's expression. You grow not to fix something broken, but to expand something already alive. And that kind of growth feels light, joyful, and rooted in gratitude. You can reinforce this by offering yourself small reminders during the day, a pause with your hand over your heart, a whisper to your own mind, "This is enough." These aren't just nice phrases, they're rewiring your nervous system, retraining your subconscious, replacing the endless loop of lack with a quiet rhythm of peace. There's a teaching in Buddhism that says, the seeker eventually finds that what he was looking for was always within him. And it's true. The need for more isn't solved by getting more. It's ended by realizing you were never missing anything real. Only the thought said you were. This kind of realization can't be forced, but it can be invited. It can be felt. And the more you rest in the presence of this moment without needing it to become something else, the more that radiance shines, not like a spotlight, but like the soft glow of a candle that never needed to burn brighter to be beautiful. So tonight, let the mind rest in enoughness. Let the breath be complete. Let the moment hold you without change. Let the chase dissolve. Let peace arrive not as a reward, but as a return. Because when the need for more dissolves, what's left is the light you've been chasing. And it's been here the whole time.